The rain hammered against Jack Mercer's windshield as his headlights caught her barefoot soaked standing in the middle of Highway 24 like a ghost. 20 years ago, billionaire Victor Carlyle's daughter vanished without a trace. Tonight she stood before a single father who had no idea he was about to uncover the most shocking conspiracy in American history. What happened to Sophia Carlyle in 2002? Stay with me until the end of this incredible story and comment your city below. I'd love to know how far this tale has traveled. The storm hit Silver Ridge, Colorado, with the kind of fury that made even longtime residents nervous. Jack Mercer gripped his steering wheel tighter as another gust of wind threatened to push his pickup truck off the narrow mountain road. He'd driven this route 1,000 times from his construction job in Denver back to the small rental house he shared with his 8-year-old daughter, Ella. But tonight felt different. The October rain fell in sheets so thick his wipers couldn't keep up, and the temperature had dropped 20 degrees in the last hour. Should have left earlier, he muttered to himself, squinting through the windshield. The dashboard clock read 9:47 p.m. Ella would be asleep by now, curled up on Mrs. Henderson's couch next door, probably still clutching that stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 3. The neighbor had been a godsend since Maria died 2 years now, though some days it felt like yesterday, others like a lifetime. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the road ahead for a brief, blinding second. That's when Jack saw her. A figure stood in the middle of the highway, arms wrapped around herself, head tilted up toward the rain as if welcoming it. Jack slammed on the brakes, his truck fishtailing slightly on the wet asphalt before coming to a stop mere feet from the woman. Jesus Christ! His heart hammered against his ribs as he threw the truck into park hazard lights, clicking on automatically. She didn't move, didn't even flinch at the near miss. Through the rain-streaked windshield, Jack could make out long, dark hair plastered to her head, a thin dress that might have been white or cream. It was hard to tell with how soaked it was, and no shoes, no coat. Nothing but that dress that clung to her frame like a second skin. Jack grabbed his work jacket from the passenger seat and jumped out of the truck. The rain hit him like ice-cold needles, instantly soaking through his flannel shirt. "Ma'am!" he shouted over the storm. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She turned slowly as if hearing him from very far away. Her eyes. God, those eyes. They were the palest blue he'd ever seen, like winter sky, and completely vacant. No fear, no recognition, no awareness that she was standing in the middle of a highway in a storm that could kill her from exposure alone. "You need to get out of the road," Jack said, approaching cautiously. He'd seen enough in his 35 years to know that people standing in roads during storms were either drunk high or running from something worse than the weather. "Come on, let me help you." She blinked, rainwater running down her face like tears. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible over the storm. I don't know where I am." "You're on Highway 24, about 10 miles outside Silver Ridge." Jack held out his jacket. "Here, put this on. You're going to freeze to death out here." She looked at the jacket as if she'd never seen one before, then slowly reached out to take it. Her fingers were like ice when they brushed his hand. "What's your name?" Jack asked gently, guiding her toward his truck. She paused, brow furrowing in concentration. "Clara," she said finally, though she sounded uncertain. I think it's Clara." "Okay, Clara, I'm Jack. Let's get you somewhere warm and dry, all right?" She nodded, but didn't move until Jack placed a gentle hand on her elbow, steering her toward the passenger side. He opened the door and helped her in, noting how she moved carefully, deliberately, like someone relearning how to exist in their own body. Once she was seated, Jack jogged around to the driver's side and climbed in, cranking up the heat immediately. The cab filled with the sound of rain drumming on metal and the blast of warm air from the vents. "Hospital," he said, reaching for his phone. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No!" The word came out sharp, panicked. Claire's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "No hospitals. Please." Jack studied her face in the dim light from the dashboard. Up close he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe late 20s, early 30s. Pretty in a delicate way, with high cheekbones and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. But it was the fear in her eyes that made him pause. Raw animal fear. "Okay," he said slowly. No hospitals. But you need help. Is there someone I can call family friends? She shook her head, water droplets flying from her hair. I can't remember. I don't remember anything before. She trailed off, looking out the window at the storm. Before what? Before the rain, she whispered. There's nothing before the rain. Jack had heard of this trauma-induced amnesia. His buddy from the army, Rodriguez, had lost 3 months after an IED explosion in Afghanistan. But this seemed different. This woman didn't just seem to have forgotten her past. She seemed untethered from reality itself. Listen, Jack said, making a decision he'd probably regret. I've got a daughter at home, 8 years old. There's a spare room used to be my wife's office. You can stay there tonight, get warm, get some food in you. Tomorrow, when the storm passes, we'll figure out what to do. Sound good? Clara turned those pale eyes on him, and for a moment Jack felt like she was looking straight through him, seeing something beyond his understanding. Why? She asked simply. Jack thought about Maria, about how she'd always insisted on helping strays, dogs, cats, people. Everyone deserves kindness, she used to say, especially when they're lost. Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. Clara nodded slowly, pulling his jacket tighter around herself. They drove in silence for the remaining 10 minutes to Silver Ridge, the storm gradually lessening to a steady rain. Jack's mind raced with the implications of what he was doing, bringing a stranger home to his daughter, someone who clearly needed more help than he could provide. But something about her vulnerability, her complete disconnection from the world, triggered every protective instinct he had. The house sat at the end of Maple Street, a modest 2-story, with peeling blue paint and a porch that listed slightly to the left. Jack had been meaning to fix both for months, but never seemed to find the time. He pulled into the driveway, noting that Mrs. Henderson's porch light was still on. "Wait here," he told Clara, then jogged next door. Mrs. Henderson answered immediately, as if she'd been watching for him. She was 73, widowed, and treated Ella like the granddaughter she never had. "Storm caught you," she said, not a question. "Yeah, listen, Mrs. H, did Ella give you any trouble?" "Angel as always. Fed her mac and cheese, did her homework asleep by 8:30. She peered past him toward his truck. "You got company." "It's complicated. I found someone who needs help, lost in the storm." Mrs. Henderson's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd been a social worker for 30 years before retiring and had seen every kind of trouble there was. "You be careful, Jack Mercer. You've got that little girl to think about." "I know. I will be." She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "Ella's on my couch. You want to carry her over, or should I wake her?" "I'll carry her." 5 minutes later, Jack had Ella in her bed, still clutching her stuffed rabbit, completely oblivious to the drama of the evening. He stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her sleep, then quietly closed the door and returned to the truck. Clara hadn't moved. She sat exactly as he'd left her, staring straight ahead at nothing. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you inside." The house smelled like coffee, and the lavender candles Maria used to love, Jack still bought them, couldn't seem to stop. He flicked on lights as they moved through the entrance, revealing a lived-in space that was clean, but cluttered with the detritus of single parenthood. Ella's drawings on the refrigerator, a basket of unfolded laundry on the couch, toys scattered across the living room floor. "Bathroom's down the hall," Jack said, grabbing a towel from the linen closet. "There should be some of my wife's clothes in the spare room closet. She was about your size. Take a hot shower change into something dry. I'll make some tea." Clara took the towel but didn't move. "Your wife." "She died, cancer, 2 years ago." "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." Jack cleared his throat. "Go on, get warm. We'll talk after." While Clara showered, Jack busied himself in the kitchen. He put the kettle on, found some chamomile tea Maria had loved, and tried not to think too hard about what he was doing. The rational part of his brain screamed that this was dangerous, stupid even. But the part of him that had learned to trust his instincts in Afghanistan, the part that had kept him alive through 2 tours, that part said this woman needed help, and he was in a position to provide it. He heard the shower shut off, and 10 minutes later, Clara emerged. She'd found one of Maria's old sweaters, a soft gray cardigan, and a pair of jeans. Her hair was wrapped in a towel, and some color had returned to her cheeks. She looked more human now, less like the ghost he'd nearly hit on the highway. Better? He asked, handing her a mug of tea. Yes, thank you. She wrapped her hands around the mug, seeming to draw comfort from its warmth. I should explain. You don't have to explain anything tonight. You're exhausted. Whatever happened, wherever you came from, it can wait until morning. Clara studied him over the rim of her mug. You're very trusting. Or very stupid, Jack admitted with a slight smile. Jury's still out. That earned him the tiniest upturn of her lips, not quite a smile, but close. I won't hurt you, she said suddenly seriously. Or your daughter. I need you to know that. I may not remember much, but I know I'm not dangerous. Not to you. The way she said it, not to you, made Jack wonder who she might be dangerous to. But he filed that thought away for later. The spare room's upstairs, second door on the right, he said. Lock's broken, but there's a chair you can wedge under the handle if it makes you feel safer. Extra blankets in the closet. Clara set down her mug and stood. Jack. Yeah. What if no one's looking for me? What if I'm nobody? Jack thought about all the times he'd felt like nobody after Maria died, how Ella's existence had been the only thing anchoring him to the world. Everyone's somebody to someone, he said, even if they don't remember it. Clara nodded and headed upstairs. Jack listened to her footsteps on the old wooden floors, the quiet click of the guest room door closing. Then he sank into his recliner, exhaustion hitting him all at once. He should call someone, the police, social services, somebody. But something told him to wait to let this play out a bit longer. He must have dozed off because he woke to the sound of crying. Not Ella, he knew every variation of his daughter's cries by heart. This was adult crying, muffled but desperate. He stood joints protesting and climbed the stairs quietly. The sound was coming from the spare room. Jack raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. Sometimes grief needed space, needed to be felt without witnesses. He'd learned that the hard way after Maria. So he stood there, hand raised, listening to a stranger cry in his dead wife's office, and wondered what memories were trying to break through whatever wall her mind had built. Eventually, the crying stopped. Jack returned to his chair and tried to sleep, but his mind wouldn't quiet. Who was Clara? Where had she come from? And why did he feel with a certainty he couldn't explain that finding her on that rain-soaked highway was going to change everything? Morning came too soon, announced by Ella, bouncing on his chair. Dad? Dad? Wake up! You slept in your clothes! Jack groaned, every muscle protesting. Hey, baby girl, what time is it? 7:30? I'm going to be late for school. No school today, remember Saturday. Oh. Ella deflated slightly, then perked up again. Can we make pancakes? Sure, but... Jack heard footsteps on the stairs. Ella, we have a guest. His daughter's eyes went wide. A guest who... Before Jack could answer, Clara appeared in the doorway. She'd found another of Maria's sweaters, this one deep blue, and her hair fell in damp waves around her shoulders. In the morning light, Jack could see things he'd missed the night before. A thin scar along her jawline hands that looked like they'd once played piano, and something about her posture that suggested formal training like a dancer or someone raised with strict etiquette. Ella, never one for shyness, marched right up to Clara. Hi, I'm Ella. Are you Dad's friend? Clara knelt down to Ella's level, a gesture so natural it seemed unconscious. Hello, Ella. I'm Clara. Your dad helped me last night when I was lost in the storm. Were you scared? I hate storms. They're so loud. I was scared, Clara admitted. But your dad was very brave and kind. Ella beamed at Jack. My dad's the best. He builds houses and knows how to fix everything. Even my bike when Tommy Fletcher broke it. Tommy Fletcher didn't break it, Jack corrected. You crashed it trying to jump off the Hendersons' porch. It was a small jump, Ella protested, making Clara smile, a real smile this time. Would you like some breakfast, Clara? Ella asked. Dad makes the best pancakes. They're shaped like animals sometimes. Clara looked to Jack, questioning. He nodded. I would love some pancakes, she said. The three of them moved to the kitchen, Ella chattering non-stop about school, her friends, her art class, her rabbit, Mr. Flopsy. Clara listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking questions at all the right moments. Jack watched them interact while he mixed batter, noting how comfortable Clara seemed with Ella, how naturally maternal her responses were. "Do you have kids?" he asked during a brief pause in Ella's monologue. Clara's hand stilled on her coffee mug. I don't know." Ella's eyes widened. "You don't know if you have kids?" "Ella." Jack started, but Clara held up a hand. "I was in an accident," she told Ella carefully. "It made me forget things. Important things. Like your family. Like my family." Ella considered this with the seriousness only an 8-year-old could muster. "That's sad. But maybe they're looking for you. We could put up posters like when Mr. Henderson's cat went missing." "Maybe," Clara said softly. Jack served pancakes regular circles, no animals, despite Ella's protests, and they ate in comfortable silence broken only by Ella's occasional observations. But Jack noticed things: how Clara held her fork with perfect etiquette, how she kept touching a spot on her chest where a necklace might rest, how her eyes lingered on the family photos scattered throughout the kitchen. After breakfast, Ella dragged Clara to the living room to show her drawings while Jack cleaned up. He could hear them talking, Ella explaining each piece in detail, Clara asking questions that made Ella giggle. It was the most animated he'd heard his daughter since Maria's death. His phone rang Mrs. Henderson. "Jack Mercer, you better not have some crazy woman in that house with Ella." "She's not crazy, Mrs. H, just lost." I'm coming over." She hung up before Jack could protest. 5 minutes later, she was at the door, arms crossed, expression stern. But it softened when she saw Clara on the floor with Ella helping her color a picture of a butterfly. "Well," Mrs. Henderson said after a long moment, "she doesn't look dangerous." Clara stood, extending a hand. "I'm Clara. You must be Mrs. Henderson. Ella's told me wonderful things about you." Mrs. Henderson shook her hand, studying Clara with eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. "You running from someone, honey?" "I don't know," Clara answered honestly. "I don't remember." Mrs. Henderson moved closer, peering at Clara's face. Then she gasped, "Lord have mercy." "What?" Jack asked. Mrs. Henderson grabbed Clara's chin gently, turning her face toward the light. "That scar on your jaw. I've seen it before." Clara pulled back slightly. "You have?" "Not in person, in a photograph. There was a girl years ago, big news story, rich family kidnapping or runaway, they never figured out which." Mrs. Henderson pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. "What did you say your name was?" "Clara." "Clara what?" I don't know." Mrs. Henderson showed them her phone screen. It was an old news article from 2002, "Billionaire's Daughter Vanishes Without a Trace." The photo showed a young woman, maybe 18 or 19, with the same pale blue eyes, the same delicate features. And there, along her jaw, the same thin scar. "Sophia Carlyle," Mrs. Henderson read. "Daughter of tech billionaire Victor Carlyle. Disappeared from the family's estate in Aspen 20 years ago. Never found." Jack looked from the phone to Clara, who had gone very pale. "That's not me," Clara whispered, but her hand went to her jaw, tracing the scar. "Honey," Mrs. Henderson said gently, "look at this picture. Look at it real close." Clara took the phone with shaking hands. Jack watched her face change as she studied the image, confusion, recognition, fear, all flashing across her features in rapid succession. I know this place," she said, pointing to the background of the photo, a grand estate with mountains behind it. There were lilies, in a fountain, and music. Someone was always playing music. "Your mother," Mrs. Henderson said, reading from the article. "Elizabeth Carlyle was a concert pianist." Clara's breathing quickened. "Elizabeth, Lizzie. She called herself Lizzie when father wasn't around." "You remember?" Jack asked. "Fragments, like broken glass, pieces that don't fit together." Clara handed the phone back, wrapping her arms around herself. "If I'm her, if I'm Sophia Carlyle, why can't I remember? Where have I been for 20 years? "That's what we need to find out," Jack said. "But first we need to be careful. If you really are Sophia Carlyle, your disappearance was huge news. There might be people who don't want you to be found. Or people who do," Mrs. Henderson added. Your father, Victor Carlyle, he never stopped looking, spent millions on private investigators, reward search teams. The man was obsessed until the day he died. He's dead? Clara asked. 5 years ago. Heart attack. But the estate, the company, it's all in trust, waiting for you if you ever turned up. Clara sank onto the couch, Ella immediately climbing up beside her, taking her hand. It's okay, Ella said solemnly. Even if you don't remember everything, you're still you. Out of the mouths of babes, Jack thought. He sat on Clara's other side, not touching, but close enough to offer support. We take this slow, he said. No rushing into anything. First we need to figure out what happened to you where you've been. Then we can worry about who you are. Clara nodded, but her eyes were distant, looking at something none of them could see. There was a woman, she said suddenly. She used to come to the house. Father's business partner. She had cold hands and smiled too much. Evelyn, her name was Evelyn. Mrs. Henderson was already typing. Evelyn Graves, CFO of Carlyle Industries, took over as interim CEO after Victor's death. She showed them another photo, a woman in her 60s with perfectly styled silver hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's her, Clara said immediately. She was there the night I disappeared. What else do you remember? Jack asked gently. Clara closed her eyes, concentrating. An argument. Father was shouting. Something about trust funds and company control. Evelyn was saying I was too young, too naive, that I'd destroy everything he'd built. Her eyes snapped open. She drugged me, put something in my tea. After that, nothing. Nothing until the rain. 20 years is a long time to keep someone hidden, Mrs. Henderson said, if that's what happened. Unless they didn't expect me to survive, Clara said quietly. Unless I was supposed to die, and something went wrong. The room fell silent except for the tick of the wall clock. Even Ella seemed to understand the gravity of what was being discussed. We need help, Jack said finally. Legal help and protection. I know someone, Mrs. Henderson said. My nephew Marcus. He's a civil rights attorney in Denver, handles whistleblower cases, corporate corruption. He'd know what to do. Can you trust him? Clara asked. With my life, and more importantly with yours. Jack stood, decision made. Call him. Set up a meeting. But here, not in Denver, I don't want Clara traveling anywhere until we know more. Mrs. Henderson nodded, already dialing. While she made the call, Jack noticed Clara had started trembling. Not from cold, the house was warm, but from the weight of possibility of a past rushing back in fragments. Hey, he said softly, you're safe here. Whatever happened, whoever you are, you're safe. She looked at him with those pale eyes, and for a moment he saw not the lost woman from the highway, but someone younger, someone who'd had her entire life stolen. Am I? She asked. If I'm really Sophia Carlyle, if Evelyn Graves did this, she's had 20 years to cover her tracks, 20 years to build her power. What chance do I have against that? You have us, Ella said firmly, still holding Clara's hand. Dad always says the good guys win if they don't give up. Jack met Clara's eyes over his daughter's head. She's right. You're not alone in this. Mrs. Henderson ended her call. Marcus can be here by this afternoon. He's bringing a colleague who specializes in missing persons cases. And Jack, he says to keep Clara inside away from windows. Don't answer the door for anyone you don't know. You think we're in danger? Clara asked. I think if you're who we think you are, you're worth about $6 billion, Mrs. Henderson said bluntly. That kind of money makes people do terrible things. As if to underscore her point, a black sedan drove slowly past the house. It might have been nothing Silver Ridge got its share of tourists, but the windows were tinted too dark, and it paused just a moment too long in front of Jack's driveway. Everyone away from the windows, Jack said quietly, his army instincts kicking in. Ella, honey, why don't you show Clara your room? But Dad! Now, baby girl. Ella must have heard something in his voice because she didn't argue, just took Clara's hand and led her upstairs. Mrs. Henderson was already on her phone again, probably calling Marcus back. Jack watched from behind the curtain as the sedan reached the end of the street, turned around, and made another slow pass. This time he caught a glimpse of the passenger, a man in a suit holding what looked like a camera with a telephoto lens. His phone rang. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered, "Hello, Mr. Mercer." The voice was female cultured with just a hint of steel underneath. "My name is Evelyn Graves. I believe you may have found something that belongs to me." Jack's blood chilled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course not. But perhaps we could discuss it in person. I'm prepared to offer a substantial reward for the return of my property." "Not interested." There was a pause. "Mr. Mercer, you have a daughter, 8 years old, attends Silver Ridge Elementary. Lovely child from what I understand. If you threaten my daughter..." "Oh no, Mr. Mercer. I don't make threats. I simply observe facts. The fact is, you're a single father with a mortgage living paycheck to paycheck. The fact is, your daughter deserves better than you can provide. I could help with that. College fund trust account enough money to ensure she never wants for anything." "In exchange for what?" "The confused woman you picked up last night needs specialized care. Medical attention. I have facilities equipped to handle her particular condition. You hand her over, you and your daughter are set for life. Everyone wins. And if I refuse," another pause longer this time, "then I'll have to pursue other avenues to retrieve what's mine. Legal avenues, of course. Did you know that harboring a mentally incompetent person can be considered kidnapping? That child services tends to look unfavorably on single fathers who bring unstable strangers into homes with young children." Jack's grip on the phone tightened. "You stay away from my family." "That's entirely up to you, Mr. Mercer. You have 24 hours to consider my offer. I'll call again tomorrow." The line went dead. Mrs. Henderson appeared at his shoulder. "Was that who I think it was?" "Yeah, she knows Clara's here, knows about Ella. Marcus is bringing backup. His firm has connections with the FBI's white-collar crime division. If this woman has been holding someone captive for 20 years, we don't know that for sure." "No, but we know she's scared enough to threaten you within hours of Clara appearing. That tells me everything I need to know." Jack looked up the stairs where he could hear Ella showing Clara her collection of stuffed animals, their voices mixing in a way that sounded almost like family. "I should never have brought her here," he said. "Bull," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "You did what Maria would have done, what any decent person would do. Now we protect her, and we protect Ella, and we nail this witch to the wall." Despite everything, Jack smiled slightly. "Language, Mrs. H." "Oh, honey, you haven't heard nothing yet. Someone threatens my grandbaby, and yes, that's what Ella is to me. They better be ready for war." The black sedan passed by once more, slower this time. Jack could see 2 men inside now, both watching the house intently. "War," he repeated quietly. "I just wanted to help someone out of the rain. Sometimes," Mrs. Henderson said, "that's how wars start. One person doing the right thing when everyone else would look away." Upstairs, Ella laughed at something Clara said, the sound bright and innocent in a morning that had suddenly turned dark with possibility. Jack made a decision, then. Not the smart one. Maybe not even the safe one, but the right one. "Call Marcus back," he said. "Tell him to bring everyone he can trust. If Evelyn Graves wants a fight, she's got one." The sedan had parked at the end of the street now, engine running, waiting. Jack let them see him watching. Let them know he wasn't intimidated. He'd faced worse than corporate criminals in Afghanistan. And he had something they didn't, something Maria had taught him. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the world was simply refusing to let go when someone needed you to hold on. Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, Ella beside her. "Jack, is everything okay?" He looked up at her, this woman who might be worth billions, who might have had 20 years stolen from her, who his daughter had already decided to protect with the fierce loyalty of childhood. "Everything's going to be fine," he said, and meant it. "We're going to figure this out together." Outside, storm clouds were gathering again on the horizon. But this time, Jack wasn't worried about the weather. He was thinking about Clara's eyes when she'd said Evelyn's name. The flicker of memory that had looked more like rage than fear. Maybe Clara wasn't the helpless victim everyone assumed. Maybe after 20 years, Sophia Carlyle was finally ready to fight back. And Jack Mercer's single dad from Silver Ridge, Colorado, was going to make sure she got that chance. The afternoon sun had barely broken through the gathering clouds when Marcus Henderson arrived with two companions. Jack watched from the window as they parked directly behind the black sedan, effectively blocking it in. The message was clear. They weren't intimidated either. Marcus was nothing like his aunt, where Mrs. Henderson was short and round. He stood well over 6 feet with the build of someone who'd played college football. His companions were equally impressive, a sharp-dressed woman with steel-gray hair and a younger man whose eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. "Uncle Jack!" Marcus called out loudly as he approached the house, making sure the watchers heard the familial reference. It was smart, establishing that this wasn't just some lawyer visiting a client, but family protecting family. Mrs. Henderson let them in quickly. "About time you got here." Marcus hugged his aunt, then turned to Jack with an extended hand. "Jack Mercer. Heard a lot about you. All good, mostly." His smile was warm, but his eyes were serious. "This is Diana Chen, former FBI, now private investigator. And Thomas Wright, he specializes in identity recovery cases." Diana Chen stepped forward, her handshake firm. "Mr. Mercer, we need to move quickly. The fact that Evelyn Graves has already made contact means she's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also make dangerous moves." "She threatened my daughter, what?" Jack said flatly. Thomas Wright, who looked young enough to be fresh out of law school but carried himself with surprising confidence, pulled out a recording device. "Did you record the conversation?" "No, I didn't think." "It's okay. We can work with that." "Where's Clara?" "Upstairs with Ella. They're coloring." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "The potential missing Carlisle heiress is upstairs coloring with an 8-year-old. It seems to calm her," Jack said defensively. "The memories, when they come, they're painful." Diana was already pulling out files from her briefcase. "We need to talk to her, but first let me show you what we found on the way here." She spread photographs across Jack's dining room table. Victor Carlisle was brilliant but paranoid. He installed security systems throughout his estate that uploaded to private servers that Evelyn Graves didn't know about. The photographs were grainy but clear enough. They showed a younger Evelyn Graves in what appeared to be a study, standing over someone slumped in a chair. The next photo showed two men carrying what looked like a body wrapped in a blanket. "This was taken the night Sophia Carlisle disappeared," Diana continued. "The official story was that she ran away, possibly kidnapped by someone she met online. But these images suggest something very different." Jack studied the photos, his military training helping him analyze the scene. "Those men, they're not handling her like a kidnap victim. They're careful, professional, like they've done this before." "Exactly," Thomas said. "We tracked down one of them, Raymond Morse. He's been working for Evelyn Graves for 25 years. And here's where it gets interesting. He owns a private medical facility in Wyoming, a place that specializes in long-term care for patients with severe dissociative disorders." "You think she's been held there for 20 years? "We know that facility has received regular payments from a shell company linked to Evelyn Graves," Marcus said. "Monthly payments of exactly the amount it would cost to keep someone sedated and controlled." Clara's voice came from the stairs. "I remember the needles." Everyone turned. She stood there with Ella beside her, both of them holding drawings. But Clara's eyes were focused on something far away. "They said it was medicine," she continued, descending slowly, "to help with my episodes. But the episodes only started after the medicine began." Diana Chen approached her carefully, the way someone might approach a wounded animal. "Clara, or should I call you Sophia?" "Clara," she said firmly. "Sophia feels like someone else. Someone I'm not ready to be yet." "Fair enough. Clara, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Are you up for that?" Clara nodded, moving to sit on the couch. Ella immediately cuddled up beside her, and Jack noticed how Clara's hand automatically went to stroke the child's hair, a protective maternal gesture. "Tell me about the facility," Diana said, sitting across from her. Clara's breathing deepened. "White walls, always white. They said I'd had a breakdown, that Father had sent me there to get better, but I wasn't allowed to call anyone, write letters. They said it would interfere with my treatment. How did you get out?" "There was a fire. Last week. I think time is fuzzy. The emergency systems failed, doors unlocked. I ran. I just ran until I couldn't anymore. Thomas was typing rapidly on his laptop. Fire at Morse Medical Center, Wyoming, 6 days ago. Electrical malfunction, supposedly. 2 staff members injured, 1 patient unaccounted for. That's over 300 miles from here, Jack said. You walked 300 miles. I hitchhiked some, Clara said quietly. A trucker gave me a ride part of the way, but when he started asking questions, I got scared, got out at a rest stop and kept walking. Diana pulled out another photograph. Do you recognize this woman? It was a picture of a young woman, beautiful, with long dark hair and Clara's same pale eyes, but this woman was laughing, vibrant, full of life. That's me, Clara whispered, taking the photo with trembling hands. But I look so different, so young. You were 19 when you disappeared, Marcus said gently. This was taken at your birthday party 2 weeks before. Clara stared at the photo and tears began sliding down her cheeks. I had a horse. Midnight. I loved that horse. What happened to him? Your father kept him, Diana said. Refused to sell him even when the stable hand said he was getting too old to ride. Said you'd want to see him when you came home. But father's dead. Yes, but Midnight isn't. He's 31 now, retired to a ranch in Montana. The estate still pays for his care. Clara's composure finally broke. She sobbed, clutching the photograph, and Ella wrapped her small arms around her as best she could. Jack moved to her other side, not touching, but present. They stole everything, Clara said through her tears. 20 years. My father died thinking I'd abandoned him. No, Diana said firmly. Victor Carlyle never believed you ran away. He spent every day of the last 15 years of his life looking for you. He hired hundreds of investigators, followed thousands of leads. The only reason Evelyn Graves was able to maintain control was because Victor refused to have you declared legally dead. Marcus pulled out a thick folder. This is your father's will. It's very specific. If you were found within 25 years of your disappearance, you inherit everything. The company, the estate, the trust funds, everything. How much? Clara asked, though she looked like she barely cared. Current estimated value. About $6 billion. The room went silent. Even Ella seemed to understand the magnitude of that number. But here's the catch, Thomas added. If you weren't found by the 25th anniversary, which is in 6 days, everything goes to the current board of directors with Evelyn Graves as the primary beneficiary. That's why she's desperate, Jack said. She's 6 days away from winning. 6 days away from getting away with it, Diana corrected. But we're not going to let that happen. The black sedan's engine suddenly roared to life outside. Marcus smiled grimly. They're going to have a hard time leaving. He pulled out his phone, showing them a video feed. I had my associates attach a GPS tracker while we were talking. Wherever they go, we'll know. Clara stood suddenly pacing to the window. She'll come for me, Evelyn. She won't let me testify, won't let me claim what's mine. Which is why we're moving you, Diana said. Safe house, federal protection. We can have marshals here within the hour. No. Everyone turned to look at Clara. No more running, she said. No more hiding. I've been hidden for 20 years. If we run now, she wins. She gets to spin whatever story she wants. Clara, it's dangerous, Jack started. Everything's dangerous, Clara interrupted. But I have something now I didn't have before. I have proof. I have people who believe me. She looked at each of them in turn, her gaze lingering on Ella. And I have a reason to fight. Marcus and Diana exchanged glances. What do you propose? Marcus asked. We go public, today, before she can create a counter-narrative. Thomas shook his head. That's risky. She'll have lawyers, PR teams. And I have the truth, Clara said, plus whatever else you found in those servers. Diana smiled slowly. Actually, that might work. I have contacts at the Denver Post, CNN, Fox News. A story like this, they'd kill for it. But we need more than just her word, Marcus said. We need... A knock at the door interrupted him. Everyone froze. Were you expecting anyone? Diana asked Jack. No. Another knock more insistent. Mr. Mercer? My name is Dr. Patricia Morse. I'm here about my patient. Clara went rigid. That's her. The woman from the facility, the one who gave me the injections. Diana already had her phone out recording. Marcus moved to the door while Thomas positioned himself by the back exit. Jack pushed Ella behind him. "Dr. Morse," Marcus called through the door. "I'm Marcus Henderson, attorney. My client doesn't wish to speak with you. Your client is mentally ill and needs medication. Without it, she could become violent, dangerous to herself and others. Do you have a court order? I have medical power of attorney granted by her father." "Her father is dead," Marcus interrupted. "Has been for 5 years. Any power of attorney died with him." There was silence. Then Dr. Morse's voice came back harder. "She's been under my care for 2 decades. I have documentation of her illness, her episodes, her inability to function." Clara suddenly yanked open the door before anyone could stop her. "You mean the documentation of how you kept me drugged? How you told me my father didn't want to see me? How you made me believe I was insane?" Dr. Patricia Morse was a thin woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes widened, seeing Clara, then narrowed. "Sophia, you're confused. Your illness? My name is Clara now, and the only illness I had was whatever you put in those needles. You need to come with me, for your own safety." "She's not going anywhere," Jack said, stepping beside Clara. Dr. Morse's gaze shifted to him dismissively. "And you are someone who's not afraid of you. You should be Mr. Mercer. You have no idea what you're dealing with. This woman has a documented history of violence delusions, documented by you." Diana interrupted her phone, still recording. "Tell me, Dr. Morse, how much does Evelyn Graves pay you to keep patients that don't exist?" The doctor's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" "Because we have financial records. 20 years of payments for a patient who was supposedly a voluntary commit, but was never allowed visitors, never allowed to leave. That sounds less like treatment and more like imprisonment." Dr. Morse took a step back. "You don't understand. If she remembers, if she fully remembers, it could destroy her mind. The trauma—" "What trauma?" Clara demanded. "What did you do to me?" "Not what we did. What you saw." Dr. Morse's composure was cracking. "The night you disappeared, you saw something you shouldn't have. Something about your father's business, about Evelyn's plans. She couldn't kill you, that would have been too suspicious. So she had you, contained, controlled. It was supposed to be temporary just until certain deals went through. But then your father kept looking, kept pushing, and temporary became permanent. You're admitting to kidnapping and false imprisonment," Marcus said calmly. "On recording." Dr. Morse's eyes widened as she realized what she'd said. She turned to run, but Thomas was already there, blocking her path. "I think you should stay," he said pleasantly. "The FBI will want to talk to you." The doctor looked around wildly. Then her shoulders slumped. "You don't understand what Evelyn is capable of, what she'll do to protect what she's built. She has judges, politicians, police—" "Had," Diana corrected, past tense, "because in about an hour this story is going to be on every news channel in the country. Hard to buy your way out of that kind of spotlight." Dr. Morse sank onto the porch step, looking suddenly old and defeated. "She'll kill me. When she finds out I talked, she'll kill me." "Only if she's free to do it," Marcus said. "Help us, and we'll make sure she never gets the chance." Clara knelt in front of the doctor. 20 years. You stole 20 years of my life. The least you can do is help me get justice." Dr. Morse looked at her for a long moment. "You really don't remember, do you? What you saw that night? Tell me." "Your father was going to change his will, cut Evelyn out completely. She'd been embezzling, setting up shell companies, preparing to take over. But Victor found out. He was going to expose her, have her arrested. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning. So she took me." "She killed him," Dr. Morse said quietly. "Not directly, but the stress of losing you, the guilt, the obsessive searching, she knew it would destroy him. And it did. Heart attack at 62, sitting at his desk with your picture in his hand." Clara stood slowly, and Jack saw something change in her face. The lost woman from the highway was gone. In her place stood someone harder, angrier, more determined. "Where's the proof?" she asked. "What—" "The real documentation. Not the false medical records, but the real proof of what she did. You kept it, didn't you, as insurance?" Dr. Morse hesitated, then nodded. Safety deposit box, First National Bank in Denver. Diana was already on the phone with her FBI contacts. Within minutes, they could hear sirens approaching. The black sedan peeled out tires squealing, but Marcus just smiled. Let them run, he said. We know where they're going. The next hour was chaos. FBI agents swarmed the house, taking statements, collecting evidence. A doctor. Morse was taken into custody both for her crimes and her protection. Ella, overwhelmed by all the activity, clung to Clara's hand, and Clara held on just as tight. You okay, sweetheart? Clara asked her during a brief break in the questioning. Ella nodded solemnly. Are you really a princess like in the movies? No, honey, just someone who lost her way for a while. But you're rich. I might be. Does that matter to you? Ella considered this. Will you still make cookies with me? Clara hugged her tight. All the cookies you want. Jack watched them, something warm and painful blooming in his chest. His daughter hadn't been this comfortable with anyone since Maria died. And Clara, she held Ella like she was precious, protected, loved. Special Agent Sarah Kim approached him. Mr. Mercer, we're going to need to place you all in protective custody until we can arrest Evelyn Graves. No. Agent Kim blinked. Excuse me. Clara's right. No more hiding. We do this in the open in public. Make it so big she can't touch us without everyone seeing. The agent looked skeptical. That's a dangerous game. Maybe, but it's the right one. Diana Chen had been busy on her phone, and now she looked up with a satisfied smile. Done. Press conference tomorrow morning, Denver Capitol steps. Every major news outlet will be there. Clara tells her story, we present the evidence, and Evelyn Graves becomes the most wanted woman in America. She'll run, Thomas pointed out. No, Clara said quietly. She won't. She's too arrogant, too sure she can win. She'll come at us legally, first try to discredit me. That's when we'll get her. Marcus nodded approvingly. You're thinking like a Carlyle now. I'm thinking like someone who's tired of being a victim. As the FBI agents finished their work and the sun began to set, Jack found himself alone with Clara on the back porch. Ella was inside with Mrs. Henderson, probably being spoiled with cookies and hot chocolate. Thank you, Clara said softly, for stopping that night, for bringing me home, for believing me. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You could have driven past, could have called the cops and let them deal with it. Instead, you brought a stranger into your home, risked your daughter's safety. You're not dangerous. No, but the people after me are. Jack turned to look at her. In the fading light, she looked ethereal, otherworldly, but also solid, real, present in a way she hadn't been that first night. My wife would have liked you, he said suddenly, surprising himself. Yeah. She had a thing about broken birds, always bringing home strays, fixing them up. Used to drive me crazy. I'm not broken, Clara said, but there was no heat in it. No, Jack agreed. Bent, maybe, but not broken. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one. Tomorrow would bring cameras and questions lawyers and lies. But tonight, there was just this two damaged people standing on a porch finding comfort in not being alone. What happens after? Clara asked. After the press conference, the arrests, the trials. What happens when I'm Sophia Carlyle again? You figure it out day by day. And you and Ella. Jack wanted to say something about how they'd still be there, how this connection they'd formed meant something. But it was too soon, too complicated. So instead he said, we'll be cheering you on. Clara turned to face him fully. I want more than that. Clara, I know it's crazy. I know I have no right to ask. But these past 2 days feeling like part of something, part of a family, I don't want to lose that. You're about to be worth $6 billion. You can have any life you want. But not any family I want. That has to be chosen freely by everyone involved. Before Jack could respond, Ella appeared in the doorway. Clara, Mrs. Henderson says dinner's ready. She made pot roast. Clara smiled at the little girl, then looked back at Jack. We should go in. As they walked inside, Jack caught her hand briefly. We'll figure it out, he said. All of it. Together. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. But the promise lingered of possibility of hope, of something neither of them had expected to find on a rain-soaked highway. The local news was already running teasers about tomorrow's press conference. Billionaire's missing daughter found alive after 20 years. Exclusive details tomorrow. Evelyn Graves had to be watching, had to be planning her counter-move. But as Jack watched Clara help Ella set the table laughing at something Mrs. Henderson said, he thought maybe they had something Evelyn didn't expect. They had each other. They had truth. And sometimes that was enough to win even the most impossible fights. The night deepened around the little house on Maple Street, but inside there was warmth and light, and the tentative beginning of something that might, if they were very lucky and very brave, become a family. Tomorrow Clara would reclaim her name, her fortune, her life. But tonight she was just Clara, sitting at a dinner table with people who cared about her, not for her money or her name, but for the woman she was becoming, one memory, one moment, one choice at a time. And when Ella asked if Clara would read her a bedtime story, and Clara said yes with tears in her eyes, Jack knew that whatever happened next, they'd already won the only battle that really mattered. They'd found each other. The morning of the press conference arrived with unseasonable warmth, the October sun burning off the mountain mist by 7 o'clock. Clara stood in front of the bathroom mirror in Jack's house, staring at her reflection as if seeing herself for the first time. Diana Chen had brought her a navy blue dress, professional but not ostentatious, and helped her with makeup that made her look polished, but not artificial. "You ready for this?" Diana asked, applying the final touches of lipstick. "No," Clara said honestly, "but I don't think I ever will be." Downstairs, Jack was trying to convince Ella that she couldn't come to Denver with them. The little girl stood with her arms crossed, lower lip jutting out in determination. "But Clara needs me," Ella insisted. "What if she gets scared?" "The FBI agents will be there, sweetheart, and Marcus and Diana. But they're not us, Dad. We're her family now." The word hung in the air as Clara descended the stairs. Family. Such a simple word for such a complicated thing. "She's right," Clara said quietly. "I'd feel better if you were both there." Jack looked torn. "It could be dangerous. If Evelyn tries something." "She won't. Not with all those cameras. She's too smart for violence in public. That's not her style." Clara knelt beside Ella. "But you have to promise to stay close to your dad. Okay? No wandering off." "Promise," Ella said solemnly, then threw her arms around Clara's neck. "You look pretty, like a princess going to save her kingdom." Marcus arrived with a convoy of FBI vehicles. The plan was simple: drive to Denver, hold the press conference, present the evidence, and let public pressure do what 20 years of searching hadn't bring Evelyn Graves to justice. But as they loaded into the vehicles, Clara's phone, a burner Marcus had given her, rang. Unknown number. "Don't answer," Diana started, but Clara had already accepted the call and put it on speaker. "Hello, Sophia." Evelyn Graves' voice was exactly as Clara remembered, cultured cold, with an undertone of perpetual disappointment. "Or are you going by Clara now I heard about your little press conference? I'm disappointed. I thought we could handle this privately, like civilized people." "Civilized people don't lock teenagers in psychiatric facilities for 20 years, Clara replied, her voice steady. "Is that what Patricia told you, poor dear, always so dramatic? You were ill, Sophia, dangerously ill. Your father agreed." "My father is dead because of you." There was a pause. "Your father was a weak man who couldn't accept hard truths. His daughter had a psychotic break, attacked a board member." "That's a lie." "Is it? I have documents, medical records, security footage of you screaming about conspiracies attacking me in your father's study. You were dangerous, Sophia. You still are." Clara's hands were shaking, but her voice remained firm. "Then why not have me arrested? Why hide me away?" "Because your father begged me to protect you, to keep you safe from yourself. And I did at great personal cost. Do you know how much I've spent on your care? How many opportunities I sacrificed to honor my promise to Victor?" Jack grabbed the phone. "Lady, you're so full of it, I can smell you from here." "Ah, the heroic construction worker. Tell me, Mr. Mercer, how well do you really know this woman? Has she told you about the voices she hears, The episodes where she doesn't know who she is, the violence she's capable of. I know she's scared of you, that's enough for me. How touching, but fear and paranoia often go hand in hand. Ask her about the fire at the facility. Ask her if she really remembers how it started. The line went dead. Clara stared at the phone, her face pale. The fire, I don't remember starting it. Because you didn't, Diana said firmly. We have the fire marshal's report. Electrical malfunction in the basement, nothing to do with the patient ward. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and they all knew it. That was Evelyn's gift, not outright lies, but half-truths twisted into weapons. The drive to Denver took 90 minutes, and with each mile the media presence grew. News vans followed their convoy helicopters circled overhead, and by the time they reached the Capitol steps, hundreds of people had gathered. Jesus, Jack muttered, pulling Ella closer. This is insane. This is justice, Marcus corrected. 20 years in the making. They were ushered to a podium set up on the Capitol steps. Cameras flashed like strobes, reporters shouted questions, and Clara looked small and fragile against the backdrop of government granite. But when she stepped to the microphone, something changed. Her shoulders straightened, her chin lifted, and for the first time Jack could see the woman she might have been if those 20 years hadn't been stolen. My name is Sophia Claire Carlyle, she began, her voice carrying across the crowd. 20 years ago, I disappeared from my family's estate in Aspen. The world was told I ran away, possibly kidnapped, probably dead. That was a lie. The crowd fell silent, even the reporters stopping their chatter. I was drugged, kidnapped, and held in a private psychiatric facility for 2 decades by people my father trusted, people who stood to gain billions if I never surfaced. I was told I was insane, violent, dangerous. I was kept sedated, isolated, forgotten. But 6 days ago I escaped, and today I'm here to tell the truth. She spoke for 20 minutes, laying out the facts with a clarity that surprised everyone, including herself. The drugs that stole her memories, the lies about her father not wanting to see her, the way they'd made her doubt her own sanity until she almost believed she was the monster they claimed. When she finished, the questions came in a flood. Where's your proof? Diana stepped forward with boxes of documents. Financial records, medical files, security footage from the Carlyle estate the night of the disappearance. Everything is here, and copies have been provided to the FBI and the Attorney General's office. What about Evelyn Graves' claims that you're mentally unstable? I probably am, Claire said, surprising everyone with her honesty. 20 years of forced medication and isolation don't leave someone undamaged. But unstable doesn't mean wrong. It doesn't mean lying. And it certainly doesn't justify what was done to me. A commotion at the edge of the crowd drew everyone's attention. A black town car had pulled up, and Evelyn Graves emerged flanked by a team of lawyers. She looked exactly as Clara remembered, silver hair, perfectly coiffed designer suit, immaculate smile sharp as winter. I hate to interrupt this performance, Evelyn said, her voice somehow carrying despite having no microphone. But I felt the public deserved to hear both sides of this tragic story. She approached the podium with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight that mattered. Clara stepped back instinctively, and Jack moved closer, Ella's hand tight in his. Ladies and gentlemen, Evelyn continued, somehow commandeering the press conference. What you're witnessing is the heartbreaking result of mental illness left untreated. Sophia Carlyle did disappear 20 years ago into a delusion so complete that she's convinced herself of this elaborate conspiracy. You're lying, Clara said, but without a microphone, her voice barely carried. Evelyn produced a tablet, holding it up for the cameras. Security footage from the Carlyle estate the night in question. Would you like to see what really happened? The footage played on the large screen someone had hastily set up. It showed a young Clara in what appeared to be Victor Carlyle's study, screaming, throwing books, attacking someone off camera. The quality was poor, grainy, but the resemblance was unmistakable. That's not real, Clara whispered, but doubt crept into her voice. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Evelyn asked. Or have the medications finally worn off enough for the truth to surface? You had a psychotic break, Sophia. You attacked me, threatened to kill yourself and others. Your father was devastated, but he agreed that long-term psychiatric care was your only option. Marcus stepped forward. That footage has been doctored. We can prove apochika. Can you... How convenient that you claim evidence is fake when it doesn't support your narrative. Evelyn turned to the cameras. I've cared for this young woman for 20 years, spending millions on the best psychiatric care available. And this is my thanks wild accusations and conspiracy theories. The crowd was murmuring now, uncertain. This was the problem with truth. It was often less convincing than a well-crafted lie. But then Ella pulled free from Jack's hand and ran to the podium before anyone could stop her. She grabbed the microphone, her small voice booming across the plaza. You're a liar and a mean lady, she shouted at Evelyn. Claire's not crazy. She's nice and reads me stories and makes the best hot chocolate, and you're just mad because she escaped and now you can't steal her daddy's money. The crowd fell silent again, charmed by the fierce little girl defending her friend. But Evelyn's expression turned cold, dangerous. How sweet, she said, using a child as a prop. Tell me, Mr. Mercer, she looked directly at Jack. How much are they paying you to house this woman, to provide this touching family tableau? Jack started forward, rage flooding through him, but Clara caught his arm. Don't, she whispered. This is what she wants. To make us look unstable, violent. But something else was happening in the crowd. People were pulling out their phones, not to record, but to search. Within minutes, someone shouted, the facility in Wyoming, it's owned by Evelyn Graves. The payments, they're all here in public corporate filings. Victor Carlisle's will, it's public record. Everything goes to his daughter, unless she's declared dead or incompetent. Evelyn's composure cracked slightly. Corporate structures are complex. Is that why you had my father's will changed 3 times in the year after I disappeared? Clara asked, finding her voice again. Each time extending the period before I could be declared dead. That was Victor's wish. Or was it because you needed time to solidify your control over the company to make yourself indispensable? Diana had been working on her laptop and suddenly smiled. Got it. The original security footage from the Carlisle estate. The real footage from Victor's private server. She connected to the screen. Let's see what really happened that night. The new footage was clear, time-stamped, authenticated. It showed young Sophia Carlisle in her father's study. Yes, but she wasn't attacking anyone. She was backing away from Evelyn Graves, who held a syringe. No, please. The young Sophia's voice was clear on the audio. I won't tell anyone about the money, I promise. Just let me go. I'm afraid it's too late for that, dear, Evelyn's younger self replied. Your father's too trusting. He'd believe you over me, and I've worked too hard to let a spoiled child ruin everything. The injection, the struggle, Sophia collapsing. Then the 2 men entering, wrapping her in a blanket, carrying her out, and Evelyn's voice cold and calculating. Make sure she's kept sedated. I don't care how long it takes. She doesn't leave that facility until I say so. The crowd exploded. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions at Evelyn, whose lawyers formed a protective wall around her. That's fabricated, Evelyn shouted. Deep fake technology. But the FBI agents were already moving Agent Kim's voice, cutting through the chaos. Evelyn Graves, you're under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy to commit fraud. The list went on, but Clara had stopped listening. She was shaking, the adrenaline of confrontation giving way to something deeper. 20 years of gaslighting, of being told she was insane, of doubting her own memories, all validated in a few minutes of authentic footage. Jack wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. Ella hugged her from the other side, fierce and protective. You did it, Jack murmured. You won. Not yet, Clara said, watching as Evelyn was led away in handcuffs, still protesting her innocence. She has resources, lawyers, connections. This isn't over. But something had shifted in the crowd's energy. People were applauding, some crying. A woman pushed forward, grabbing Clara's hand. My daughter disappeared 10 years ago, she said through tears. They said she ran away, but I never believed it. Seeing you here, seeing you fight, it gives me hope. More people pressed forward, sharing stories of lost loved ones, of systems that failed them, of justice delayed but not forgotten. Clara listened to each one, held their hands, promised to help however she could. Marcus appeared at her elbow. We need to get you somewhere safe. Evelyn's not the only one with an interest in the Carlisle fortune. There will be others. Let them come, Clara said with a firmness that surprised everyone, including herself. I'm done hiding. The ride back to Silver Ridge was quieter than the morning journey. Ella had fallen asleep against Clara's shoulder, emotionally exhausted from the day's drama. Jack drove while Marcus and Diana fielded calls from reporters, lawyers, and law enforcement. The board of directors is calling an emergency meeting, Marcus reported. They want to know your intentions regarding the company. Tell them they'll find out when I'm ready to tell them, Clara replied. I've waited 20 years. They can wait a few days. As they neared Silver Ridge, Clara's burner phone rang again. This time, it was a number Marcus recognized. That's Raymond Morse, he said. The facility owner. He's probably trying to make a deal. Clara answered anyway. Mr. Morse? Miss Carlyle. His voice was nervous, stuttering. I want you to know I had no idea what Evelyn was really doing. I thought you were genuinely ill, that we were helping. You kept me drugged and imprisoned for 20 years, following what I believed were legitimate medical orders. Please, I have a family, children. I'll testify against Evelyn, tell everything I know. Just please don't destroy my life like she destroyed yours. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Jack watched her in the rearview mirror, saw her struggling between justified anger and unexpected mercy. Testify, she said finally. Tell the truth, all of it, and then disappear. Change your name, leave the country. I don't care. But if I ever see you again, if you ever come near me or anyone I care about, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison. Understood? Yes, yes, thank you. You won't regret. Clara hung up. That was generous, Diana observed. That was strategic, Clara corrected. His testimony will ensure Evelyn never sees freedom again, and honestly, I don't have enough anger for everyone involved. Just her. She's the one who stole everything. They pulled into Jack's driveway as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Mrs. Henderson was on the porch, waiting with a pot of coffee and enough food to feed an army. Saw you on the news, she said, enveloping Clara in a hug. You did good, honey. Real good. As they settled into the living room, the weight of the day began to sink in. Clara had her identity back. Her truth validated her enemy arrested. But what came next? You'll need to go to Aspen, Marcus said gently. The estate is yours now. The company headquarters is there. The board will want to meet. Tomorrow, Clara said. Tonight, I just want to be here. After dinner, after Ella had been put to bed with 3 stories instead of the usual one, Clara found herself on the back porch with Jack again. It was becoming their spot, their place for conversations too important for anywhere else. You were incredible today, Jack said. The way you stood up to her told your truth, despite everything. Maria would have been in awe. I was terrified every second. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Clara turned to look at him. Is that from your army days? That's from my raising a daughter alone after losing my wife days. They sat in comfortable silence, the night sounds of Silver Ridge surrounding them. Crickets, a distant dog barking the whisper of wind through the aspens. I have to leave, Clara said finally. You know that, right? I have to go to Aspen, deal with the estate, the company. Figure out who Sophia Carlyle is supposed to be. I know. But I want to come back, if you'd be okay with that. Jack reached over and took her hand. Clara, you're about to be one of the richest women in America. You could live anywhere, do anything. Why would you want to come back to a small mountain town and a broken-down house with a single dad and his daughter? Because this is where I remembered how to be human, Clara said simply. This is where I found myself. Not Sophia Carlyle, the billionaire's daughter. Just Clara, who reads bedtime stories and makes hot chocolate and sits on back porches trying to figure out how to live. We'll be here, Jack promised. However long it takes, whatever you need to do. We'll be here. Clara squeezed his hand, then stood. I should sleep. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. As she reached the door, Jack called out, Clara. She turned. Ella was right, you know, what she said at the press conference. You do make the best hot chocolate. Clara laughed, the sound bright and genuine in the darkness. That's the first thing I remembered how to do. 3 nights ago, when I couldn't sleep, I came down to your kitchen and my hands just knew, like muscle memory from before. From your mother. Maybe. I hope so. She went inside, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts. 3 days ago, he'd nearly hit a stranger on a rain-soaked highway. Now that stranger had become something he couldn't quite name, not quite family, more than friend. A presence that had somehow made their broken little household feel complete again. Inside, Clara paused outside Ella's room. The little girl was sleeping peacefully. Mr. Flopsy clutched in her arms. On the nightstand was a drawing she'd made that afternoon. While the adults were dealing with lawyers, it showed 3 figures holding hands in front of a house. "My family" was written across the top in careful, wobbly letters. Clara touched the drawing gently, tears sliding down her cheeks. Not for what she'd lost 20 years couldn't be recovered, but for what she'd found. A little girl who defended her without hesitation. A man who'd offered shelter without conditions. A home that wasn't grand but was filled with something infinitely more valuable than money. Tomorrow she would drive to Aspen and face the ghosts of a life interrupted. She would walk through rooms she barely remembered, look at pictures of parents now dead, try to understand the empire built on her absence. She would meet with lawyers and accountants and board members who would see her as either an opportunity or a threat. But tonight, she was just Clara standing in a hallway in a modest house in Silver Ridge, Colorado, listening to a child's peaceful breathing and knowing that somehow against all odds she'd found her way home. Not to the home she'd lost, but to the one she'd needed, a place where broken people helped each other heal, where family was chosen rather than inherited, where love wasn't about blood or money, but about showing up, staying present, and refusing to let go. The moon rose over the mountains full and bright, illuminating a world that suddenly seemed full of possibility. And somewhere in Denver, in a federal holding cell, Evelyn Graves sat in silence, her empire crumbling, her carefully constructed lies exposed. Justice had taken 20 years, but it had finally arrived. Not with vengeance or violence, but with truth spoken in a clear voice, a child's fierce loyalty, and the unshakable power of people who refused to let injustice stand. The story would continue tomorrow. There would be trials and testimonies, financial complications, and corporate battles. But the hardest fight was already won. Clara had reclaimed not just her name or her fortune, but her right to exist, to remember, to be believed. And in a small house at the end of Maple Street, 3 people who'd been strangers just days ago settled into sleep. Not yet a family, but something close, something growing, something that 20 years of lies couldn't destroy and $6 billion couldn't buy. Something real. The Carlisle estate in Aspen looked exactly as Clara remembered it in her fragment, sprawling pristine and cold. She stood at the iron gates with Marcus and Diana, watching the morning sun reflect off windows that had once been her whole world. The lawyers had given her the keys the night before, along with a portfolio thick enough to use as a weapon. "You ready for this?" Diana asked. "No," Clara admitted, but she pushed the gate open anyway. The driveway curved for a quarter-mile through manicured grounds that had been maintained perfectly, despite having no one to appreciate them. The fountain she remembered was there, lilies floating on the surface just as they had 20 years ago, as if time had stopped within these walls. The house itself was a monument to wealth without warmth. 32 rooms, Marcus had told her, though she remembered using maybe 6 of them. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a line of staff she didn't recognize, all watching her with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Miss Carlisle," the head housekeeper, an older woman with kind eyes, stepped forward. "I'm Margaret Flynn. I started here 5 years ago, but some of the staff remember you from before." Clara saw him then, an elderly man at the end of the line, tears streaming down his weathered face. She knew him instantly. "James," she breathed, moving past the others to reach the old groundskeeper. "You're still here." "Miss Sophia," he said, his voice breaking, "I knew you'd come home. I told everyone who'd listen, but they said I was a foolish old man." She hugged him, this man who'd taught her to ride a bike in these very gardens, who'd snuck her cookies when her mother was strict about her diet. "The roses," she said suddenly, "my mother's roses." "Still there, miss. Everyone. Mr. Victor wouldn't let anyone touch them after." "Well, after. Said you'd want to see them when you came back." The tour of the house was surreal. Her childhood bedroom had been preserved exactly as she'd left it. Posters of bands she barely remembered liking, clothes she'd never wear again. A diary she was afraid to open. Her father's study, where everything had gone wrong, had been cleaned but not changed. Even the books Evelyn had claimed she'd thrown were neatly on their shelves. The footage was definitely doctored, Diana observed. This room shows no signs of violence. But Clara had stopped listening. She'd found a framed photo on her father's desk, not of her alone, but of the three of them, her parents and her at her high school graduation. They all looked so happy, so unaware of what was coming. "He sat here every day," Margaret said softly, "right until the end. Sometimes he'd talk to that photo like you could hear him." The corporate lawyers arrived after lunch, 5 of them in identical suits, with identical expressions of professional concern. They spread documents across the dining room table that could seat 30, explaining her holdings, her responsibilities, her options. Carlyle Industries has a current valuation of $8.3 billion, the lead attorney, Mr. Whitman, intoned. "You own 72% of voting shares. The board is naturally concerned about leadership transition." "Naturally, Sam," Clara echoed, remembering how these same board members had let Evelyn run everything for 2 decades. "They've called a meeting for tomorrow. They're hoping you'll address their concerns about stability." "Their concerns?" Clara's voice sharpened. Where was their concern when Evelyn was embezzling? When my father died alone, searching for a daughter they helped hide. That's not entirely fair, isn't it? Clara stood pacing to the window. How many of them knew Mr. Whitman? How many suspected something was wrong but stayed quiet because the stock price kept rising? The lawyer's silence was answer enough. Clara's phone buzzed a text from Jack. It was a photo of Ella's latest drawing, this one showing Clara as a superhero fighting a dragon labeled Mean Lady. Despite everything, she smiled. "I'll attend the board meeting," she said, "but on my terms." That evening, alone in the mansion, except for the staff, Clara found herself in her mother's music room. The piano, a Steinway Concert Grand, sat under a dust cover. She pulled it off, ran her fingers over the keys. They were perfectly in tune. Someone had been maintaining it. She sat on the bench, and her hands found position automatically. The music came without thought, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, her mother's favorite piece. As she played, memories flooded back in full color, not fragments anymore, but complete scenes. Her mother teaching her this very piece, patient with her mistakes. Her father listening from the doorway, pretending to read his newspaper, but really watching them with such love it made her chest ache to remember. "You play beautifully." Clara's hand stilled. A woman stood in the doorway, elderly, elegant, familiar, in a way that made Clara's heart race. "Aunt Vivian." Her mother's sister smiled, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, darling girl. I'm sorry I wasn't at the press conference. I was in Paris, flew back as soon as I heard." They collided in the middle of the room, holding each other, as 20 years of separation dissolved. Vivian had aged, her dark hair gone, silver lines mapping years of grief on her face, but her perfume was the same, bringing back memories of holidays and laughter. "I looked for you," Vivian said into Clara's hair. "I hired investigators, psychics, anyone who claimed they could help. Evelyn told me you'd run away, that you'd always been troubled, but I knew she was lying." "Why didn't you do something?" "I tried, but I had no proof, no legal standing. Victor shut me out after you disappeared. Evelyn convinced him I was making his grief worse with my conspiracy theories." Vivian pulled back, studying Clara's face. "You look so much like Elizabeth. She would be so proud of how strong you've been." They talked through the night, Vivian filling in gaps about the years Clara had lost. How her father had changed, becoming obsessed with finding her. How Evelyn had slowly taken control, always seeming so helpful, so dedicated. How the company had grown but lost its soul, becoming the kind of corporate machine Victor had once fought against. "There's something else," Vivian said as dawn approached. "Something I've been holding for 20 years, hoping I'd get to give it to you." She produced an envelope aged and yellowed. Clara's name was written across it in her mother's handwriting. "Elizabeth gave this to me a week before she died," Vivian explained. "She said to give it to you when you were ready to hear hard truths. I think that time is now." Clara opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small key. "My darling Sophia," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you're facing difficult choices. By now you've probably discovered that not everyone around your father can be trusted. Evelyn Graves is dangerous. I found evidence of embezzlement, corporate espionage, worse. I was planning to tell your father, but the cancer diagnosis changed everything. I'm running out of time, so I'm trusting this to Vivian, hoping you'll never need it. But if you do know this, there's a safety deposit box at First National Bank of Denver, number 472. Everything I found is there. Be careful, my love. Be brave. And remember, you are more than your name, more than our money. You are your own person with the power to choose who you want to be. I love you beyond words, beyond time, beyond death itself. Mom. Clara looked at the key, then at Vivian. She knew. She knew what Evelyn was. But she died before she could do anything about it, Vivian said. The cancer took her so fast. 3 months from diagnosis to murder, Clara said quietly. What if the cancer wasn't natural? What if Evelyn? We can't prove that, not after all this time. But Clara was already pulling out her phone, calling Diana. I need you to look into something, my mother's medical records from 20 years ago, and get a forensic accountant to First National Bank of Denver. We're going to need a court order for a safety deposit box. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Clara arrived at 1:30, wanting to see the conference room before it filled with people who'd betrayed her father's memory. Carlisle Industries occupied the top 5 floors of a gleaming tower in downtown Aspen, all glass and steel and aggressive modernity. But she wasn't alone. Jack stood by the elevators, Ella beside him in her best dress. What are you doing here? Clara asked, stunned. Moral support, Jack said simply. Mrs. H is watching the house. We thought you could use some friendly faces. Ella ran to her, wrapping her arms around Clara's waist. We saw your house on TV. It's really big. Do you have a pool? 3 pools, Clara said, hugging her back. But none of them have what your house has. What's that? People who love each other. The board members began arriving, 12 people in expensive suits with cautious expressions. Clara recognized some from newspaper photos, tech moguls, venture capitalists, people who'd gotten rich off her father's innovations and her absence. Miss Carlisle. The current board chairman, Robert Hayes, extended his hand. We're so pleased you've been found safe. Are you? Clara asked, not taking his hand. Or are you worried about your stock options? The meeting was tense from the start. They questioned her mental capacity, her business experience, her intentions for the company. Clara answered calmly, having spent the morning reviewing 20 years of financial statements with Marcus. The company has grown, she acknowledged. But it's also strayed from my father's vision. He wanted to innovate, to make technology that improved lives. You've turned it into a profit machine that doesn't care who it hurts. That's rather naive, Hayes started. Is it? My father built this company on the principle that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. Under Evelyn's leadership, you've abandoned contracts with schools to focus on military applications. You've laid off thousands while posting record profits. You've become everything my father stood against. Your father is dead, one board member said bluntly. And with all due respect, you've been gone for 20 years. You don't understand how the world works now. Clara stood moving to the window that overlooked the mountains. You're right. I have been gone. I've missed 20 years of change, of progress, of life. But you know what I didn't miss. The 20 years of isolation gave me something none of you have: perspective. I know what it's like to have everything stolen. I know what it's like to be powerless, and I know what really matters. She turned back to them. I'm dissolving the board. The room erupted in protests, threats of lawsuits claimed she didn't have the authority. Actually, she does, Marcus said, standing. According to the company bylaws, the majority shareholder can dismiss the entire board with cause. And I think 20 years of complicity in kidnapping and fraud qualifies as cause. You can't prove we knew Diana entered then, followed by 2 FBI agents carrying boxes. Actually, we can. Elizabeth Carlisle's safety deposit box contained extensive documentation of corporate malfeasance, including emails from several board members discussing how to handle the Sophia problem after Evelyn took over. The agents began distributing subpoenas. Several board members tried to leave only to find more agents waiting in the hallway. You're destroying this company, Hayes said desperately. The stock will tank, thousands of jobs. We'll be safe, Clara interrupted. I'm not destroying the company. I'm saving it. From you. As the board members were escorted out, Clara found herself alone in the conference room with Jack and Ella. The little girl was drawing on a legal pad, seemingly unbothered by the corporate drama. That was impressive, Jack said. Terrifying, but impressive. I don't know what I'm doing, Clara admitted. I just dismantled a board of directors. I have no idea how to run a company. You'll learn. And you'll hire people who share your father's vision. Our vision? Clara corrected, then caught herself. I know what you mean, Jack said softly. Diana returned with a laptop. You need to see this. We found something in your mother's documents. The screen showed medical records test results and a toxicology report that had never been filed. Polonium, Diana said. Trace amounts, but enough to cause aggressive cancer. It's almost impossible to detect unless you're specifically looking for it. Clara sank into a chair. She killed her. Evelyn killed my mother. We can't prove she administered it, but we can prove she had access to it through a subsidiary that dealt with nuclear medical equipment, and we can prove she was the last person to have tea with your mother before she got sick. Tea, Clara said numbly. Always tea. That's how she drugged me too. Ella looked up from her drawing. The mean lady is really, really mean. Yes, baby, Clara said, pulling the girl onto her lap. She really is. That evening, back at the estate, Clara made a decision. She called a press conference for the next morning, but this time it wasn't about revealing truth or seeking justice. It was about choosing her future. I need to ask you something, she told Jack as they walked through her mother's rose garden, and I need you to be honest. Always. If I give it up, all of it, the money, the company, everything, would you think I was crazy? Jack stopped walking. Is that what you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to honor my parents to take what they built and make it better. But another part just wants to be Clara. Just Clara who makes hot chocolate and reads bedtime stories and sits on back porches figuring out life. You can be both. Can I look at this place, Jack? Look at what wealth did to my family. It made us targets. It killed my mother, destroyed my father, stole 20 years of my life. It wasn't the wealth, Jack said carefully. It was the people who wanted it. The wealth itself is just a tool. It's what you do with it that matters. Ella had run ahead and was now trying to smell every rose in the garden. They watched her, this little girl who'd lost her mother but refused to let grief define her. She's remarkable, Clara said. She likes you, Jack replied. More than likes. She's been asking if you're going to be her new mom. Clara's breath caught. What did you tell her? That family isn't something you rush, that it has to be chosen by everyone involved. And what do you choose? Jack turned to face her fully. I choose to let you figure out who you are without pressure from me. Whether that's as a billionaire CEO or just Clara, I'll be here. We'll be here. Even if I'm complicated. Even if the trials drag on for years. Even if there are more threats, more danger. Even then. The next morning's press conference was different from the first. Clara stood in front of the Carlyle Industries building, but this time she wasn't defending herself. She was defining herself. My name is Sophia Claire Carlyle, she began. But I've chosen to go by Clara. Clara because that's who I became when everything else was taken away. Clara because that's who a little girl in Silver Ridge knows. Clara because names like families can be chosen. She announced the creation of the Sophia Carlyle Foundation dedicated to finding missing persons and supporting survivors of long-term captivity. She announced the restructuring of Carlyle Industries, returning it to its roots of ethical innovation. And she announced that she would be splitting her time between Aspen and Silver Ridge, between the life she'd lost and the life she'd found. I could let what happened define me, she said, looking directly into the cameras. I could become bitter, vengeful, focused only on punishing those who hurt me. But I've learned something in the past week. Grace isn't about forgetting what was done to you. It's about choosing who you become despite it. And I choose to become someone my parents would be proud of. Someone that little girl who defended me deserves. Someone worthy of the second chance I've been given. The questions came, but Clara answered them with a calm she hadn't possessed a week ago. Yes, she would testify at Evelyn's trial. No, she wouldn't be seeking revenge against everyone involved. Yes, she would be keeping some of the board members who'd proven themselves ethical. No, she wouldn't be living full-time in the estate. Why not? One reporter asked. It's a beautiful home. It's a beautiful museum, Clara corrected. But homes aren't about beauty. They're about the people inside them. That afternoon, she did something that would have been inconceivable to the old Sophia Carlyle. She had the estate open to the public on weekends, turning it into a museum, with proceeds going to the foundation. She kept a private apartment for when business required her presence, but the rest became a testament to her parents' legacy, rather than a prison of memory. Marcus handled the legal complexities while Diana managed the investigation that was spreading to encompass dozens of co-conspirators. The trials would take years, but Clara found she didn't care about watching them all fall. Evelyn was in custody, denied bail as a flight risk. That was enough. A month later, Clara stood in Jack's kitchen teaching Ella how to make hot chocolate the way her mother had taught her real chocolate, not powder with a hint of cinnamon and love. Jack was at the table working on blueprints for a new project, occasionally looking up to watch them with an expression that made Clara's heart race. "Is this really happening?" she asked him that night on the porch. Their spot, their place for truth. Which part? The part where you survived 20 years of hell. The part where you brought down a conspiracy. Or the part where you're learning to make a life despite it all. The part where I'm happy, Clara said. The part where I wake up and my first thought isn't about what I've lost, but about what I have. That's the only part that matters. The Carlyle fortune would always be there, a responsibility and a resource. The trials would continue justice, grinding slow but certain. The foundation would grow, helping others find their way home. But those were details, subplots in a larger story. The real story was simpler. A woman who'd lost everything found herself on a rain-soaked highway. A single father stopped to help. A little girl offered unconditional love. And together they built something that 20 years of captivity couldn't destroy and $6 billion couldn't buy. They built a family. Not the one Clara had lost, but the one she'd needed. Not perfect, but real. Not defined by blood or money, but by choice, the choice to show up, to stay, to believe in the possibility of happiness even after the impossible had happened. Evelyn Graves had stolen 20 years, but she couldn't steal this Clara's hand in Jack's as they watched the stars. Ella's laughter from upstairs, where she was supposed to be sleeping, Mrs. Henderson's apple pie cooling on the counter, the sense that tomorrow would come and they would face it together. "I love you," Clara said suddenly, surprising herself with the admission. Jack squeezed her hand. "I know." "That's it? That's all you're going to say?" "No. I'm going to say that I loved you from the moment you stood in my doorway, soaking wet and lost, but still concerned about scaring Ella. I loved you when you remembered how to make hot chocolate. I loved you when you stood up to Evelyn, when you chose justice over revenge, when you gave up a mansion to stay in our cramped little house. It's not cramped. It's cozy." "It's home," Jack corrected. "Our home if you want it to be." Clara turned to face him. "I spent 20 years in one prison. I don't want the estate to become another, even a golden one. I want this. I want Sunday dinners and homework help and arguing about whose turn it is to do dishes. I want real life messy and complicated and beautiful." "Then you have it. You have us." Inside, Ella had given up pretending to sleep and was watching from the window. When she saw them kiss, she let out a whoop that probably woke Mrs. Henderson next door. "Ella Marie Mercer," Jack called out. "Get back in bed." "Is Clara going to be my mom now?" Ella shouted back. Clara and Jack looked at each other. Then Clara called out, "We'll discuss it over pancakes tomorrow. Animal-shaped ones. Any shape you want." They heard Ella's door close, then immediately open again. "I love you, Clara." "I love you too, sweetheart." The door closed for real this time, and Clara found herself crying not from grief or trauma, but from the overwhelming realization that she'd found her way to exactly where she belonged. "No more tears," Jack said, wiping them away gently. "You've cried enough for multiple lifetimes." "These are different, Meg," Clara said. "These are happy tears. I didn't know I still had those in me." The moon rose over Silver Ridge, the same moon that had witnessed her escape, her return, her rebirth. But tonight it witnessed something else. The quiet miracle of healing, of love, growing in unlikely soil of families formed not by chance, but by choice. Tomorrow would bring challenges. The company needed restructuring. The foundation needed organizing. The trials would be brutal, forcing her to relive trauma in sterile courtrooms. There would be threats from those who'd benefited from her absence, attempts to challenge her competency, her claims, her choices. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, Clara sat on a back porch in Colorado with a man who'd saved her in more ways than one, while upstairs a little girl dreamed of animal-shaped pancakes and new beginnings. Tonight she wasn't the lost Carlisle heiress or the survivor of decades-long captivity. She was just Clara, and that was everything. The morning of Evelyn Graves's sentencing arrived with an unexpected spring snow coating Silver Ridge in pristine white that made everything look new and clean. Clara stood at the bedroom window in Jack's house, their house now, she corrected herself, watching Ella build a snowman in the backyard with the focused determination of an 8-year-old architect. "You don't have to go it," Jack said from behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Diana can represent you. The victim impact statement is already submitted." "I need to see her face," Clara said quietly. "I need to look her in the eye one last time and let her know she didn't break me." It had been 6 months since that night on the highway. 6 months of therapy trials and transformation. The legal proceedings had been exhausting. Evelyn's trial, the co-conspirators, the corporate lawsuits. But through it all, Clara had held on to what mattered, the family she'd chosen and who had chosen her back. The drive to Denver was quiet. Jack at the wheel, Marcus in the back, reviewing his notes. Clara had officially hired him as general counsel for both Carlisle Industries and the foundation, which had already helped locate 17 missing persons in its first quarter of operation. The judge received over 300 letters, Marcus said. Victims' families, shareholders, she defrauded employees she had fired to cover her tracks. "You weren't her only victim, just the most visible." "I know," Clara said. She'd read many of the letters, each one a reminder that evil rarely limited itself to a single target. The courthouse was surrounded by media, but Clara had learned to navigate the cameras with a grace that would have made her mother proud. She didn't hide anymore, didn't duck her head or avoid eye contact. She walked through the crowd with Jack beside her, their hands clasped, answering no questions but acknowledging the supporters who'd gathered with banners reading "Justice for Sophia" and 20 years too long. Inside the courtroom, Evelyn Graves sat at the defense table, looking smaller than Clara remembered. Prison had aged her. The perfect silver hair was now dull gray, the designer suits replaced with standard issue clothing. But her eyes remained the same, cold, calculating, unrepentant. When their eyes met, Evelyn smiled slightly, a predator recognizing prey. But Clara didn't look away. She wasn't prey anymore. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Williams, was known for her harsh sentences in cases involving violence against women. She listened as the prosecution laid out the full scope of Evelyn's crimes: kidnapping, false imprisonment, fraud, conspiracy, and now with the new evidence, suspicion of murder in Elizabeth Carlisle's death. When it came time for Clara's statement, she stood slowly smoothing her dress. Not designer, just something comfortable she'd bought in town with Ella's enthusiastic input. "Your Honor," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. "Evelyn Graves stole 20 years of my life. She stole my father's last years, possibly murdered my mother, and destroyed countless other lives in her pursuit of wealth and power. The temptation is to ask for the maximum sentence to ensure she spends her remaining years behind bars, as I spent 20 years in a different kind of prison." She paused, finding Evelyn's eyes again. "But I've learned something in the months since my escape. Revenge and justice aren't the same thing. Justice is about accountability, about preventing future harm. Revenge is about feeding pain with more pain, and I refuse to give Evelyn Graves any more of my life, even in the form of hatred. What I ask Your Honor is that she be sentenced appropriately for her crimes, that her victims be compensated from her personal assets, and that she be required to provide full testimony about everyone involved in my captivity and the potential murder of my mother. Beyond that, I want to forget she exists. I have a life to live, a family to love, and a foundation that's bringing other missing people home. That's my victory, not her suffering, but my happiness." Clara sat down to stunned silence. Even Evelyn looked surprised, having expected venom and received grace instead. Judge Williams nodded slowly. Thank you, Miss Carlyle. Or do you prefer Miss Mercer now? Clara smiled slightly. She and Jack weren't married yet. They were taking their time doing things right, but the judge had done her homework. Clara is fine, Your Honor. The sentence when it came was severe, but just 40 years for kidnapping, 20 for false imprisonment, 15 for fraud sentences to run concurrently with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Evelyn would be 91 before she had any chance of freedom. As the bailiffs led Evelyn away, she stopped beside Clara's seat. You think you've won, she whispered. But you're just like your father, too soft, too trusting. The world will eat you alive. Maybe, Clara whispered back. But at least I'll be living in it, not watching it through bars. Evelyn's composure finally cracked, then her face contorting with rage before the bailiffs pulled her away. It was the last time Clara would ever see her. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy was even worse, but Clara had something planned. She'd arranged for a press conference at a nearby hotel, but not for herself. Instead, she introduced 5 families whose missing loved ones had been found through the foundation's work. This is what matters, she told the cameras. Not revenge, not dwelling on the past, but using our resources and pain to help others. The Sophia Carlyle Foundation isn't about me, it's about every person who's ever vanished, every family that's ever wondered, every hope that someone somewhere is still looking. She introduced Rebecca Martinez, whose daughter had been found living under an assumed name after escaping an abusive relationship. She introduced James Chen, whose brother had been located in a psychiatric facility where he'd been placed after a misdiagnosed breakdown. Each story was different, but they all ended the same way, with reunion, with healing, with hope. The drive back to Silver Ridge was lighter. The weight of the trial finally lifted. Jack reached over and took her hand as they climbed into the mountains. You did good today, he said simply. I almost broke, Clara admitted. When she walked past me, I wanted to scream at her to tell her about every nightmare, every moment of despair. But you didn't. No, because that would have given her power she doesn't deserve anymore. They arrived home to find Ella and Mrs. Henderson had decorated the house with a massive welcome home banner and what appeared to be every balloon in Silver Ridge. We're celebrating, Ella announced, dragging Clara inside. Mrs. H helped me make a cake and everything. The cake was lopsided, covered in uneven chocolate frosting and approximately a pound of sprinkles, and it was perfect. It's beautiful, Clara said, hugging the little girl. The most beautiful cake I've ever seen. Really, 'cause I messed up and one side kind of fell. Really, it's perfect, because you made it with love. That evening, after Ella had crashed from her sugar high and Mrs. Henderson had returned home, Clara found herself in what had become her favorite spot in the house. Not the back porch, but Ella's room, sitting on the edge of the bed watching the little girl sleep. Jack found her there. She asked me something today, he said quietly, while you were gone. What? If she could start calling you Mom. Clara's breath caught. What did you tell her? That she should ask you herself. Jack, I know we're not married, I know we're taking things slow, but Clara, she already sees you as her mother, has for months now. Clara touched Ella's hair gently, remembering her own mother doing the same when she was small. My therapist says I'm making remarkable progress, but I still have so far to go. What if I'm not ready to be someone's mother? You already are, Jack said simply. Every bedtime story, every homework session, every nightmare you've soothed, you've been her mother in every way that counts. The money complicates things, Clara said, voicing the concern that had been nagging at her. I don't want her growing up the way I did, isolated by wealth, targeted because of it. Then we don't let that happen. We stay here in Silver Ridge. She goes to public school. She has chores. She learns the value of money by earning it, not inheriting it. And the billions? Go to the foundation, to charity, to making the world better. Keep what we need for security, for education, for opportunities. But we live like normal people because that's what we are. Clara turned to look at him. When did you get so wise? Probably around the time I fell in love with a complicated billionaire who makes the best hot chocolate in Colorado. They were interrupted by Ella stirring, her eyes fluttering open. Clara, she said sleepily, you're home. I'm home, sweetheart. Ella sat up suddenly, more awake. I have something to ask you. Dad said I should. Clara's heart raced, but she kept her voice calm. You can ask me anything. Can I call you Mom? Not instead of my real mom, but also Mrs. Henderson says, people can have more than one mom if they're lucky, and I think I'm really lucky. Clara looked at Jack, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Ella. I would be honored to be your also mom. Ella launched herself into Clara's arms with enough force to knock them both backward onto the bed. Mom, I have two moms. That's even better than Sarah Chen, who has two dogs. They laughed, all three of them tangled together on Ella's small bed, and Clara felt something settle into place in her chest, the last piece of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. The next morning brought a different kind of challenge. Clara had a board meeting via video conference, the first since she'd restructured the company. She'd hired a new CEO, Dr. James Patterson, a tech innovator who shared her father's original vision of ethical technology. But she remained chairman guardian of her father's legacy. She took the call from the home office she'd set up in what used to be Maria's craft room. Jack had offered to convert it, but Clara liked the traces of his late wife that remained: the paint stains on the floor, the butterfly stencils on the wall. It felt like blessing, like Maria saying it was okay to love her family. The military contract renewal is up for vote, Dr. Patterson said through the screen. It's worth $800 million over 5 years. What kind of military application? Clara asked. Surveillance software, the kind that could monitor entire populations. Then no. We don't build tools of oppression. The board won't be happy. That's a lot of money to walk away from. The board serves at my pleasure, Clara reminded him. And I'd rather have a smaller company with a clean conscience than an empire built on suffering. After the call, she found Jack in the garage working on a rocking chair. He'd taken up woodworking as a hobby, creating beautiful pieces that he donated to the foundation's safe houses. How'd the meeting go? He asked, not looking up from his sanding. I just turned down $800 million. Good for you. Pizza for dinner. Clara laughed. This was what she loved about Jack. He understood that the money was just numbers on a screen, that the real wealth was in their daily life together. Actually, she said, I was thinking we could go to the Autumn Festival. Ella's been talking about it for weeks. The Silver Ridge Autumn Festival was exactly the kind of small-town event Clara had never experienced growing up. There were carnival games, local craft vendors, a pie-eating contest that Jack entered and lost spectacularly, and a dance floor set up under strung lights where couples swayed to a local band. Clara watched Ella run from booth to booth with her friends, just another kid at the festival, not the daughter of one of America's wealthiest women. This was what she'd wanted: normalcy, community, belonging. Dance with me, Jack said, pulling her onto the floor. People are staring, Clara murmured as he spun her around. Let them. They're just jealous I'm with the prettiest woman here. Flatterer. Truth-teller. They danced as the sun set behind the mountains, and Clara realized she hadn't thought about Evelyn, about the trials, about the lost years all day. The past was losing its hold on her, replaced by the present's immediate joys and the future's bright possibilities. Clara, Mom, look. Ella ran up holding a goldfish in a bag. I won it at the ring toss. Can we keep it? Of course, Clara said, then stage whispered, but your dad has to clean the bowl. Hey, Jack protested, but he was smiling. They walked home together as the festival wound down, Ella chattering about names for her goldfish. Jack carrying the various prizes she'd won, Clara feeling the kind of contentment she'd thought was lost to her forever. That night, after Ella was asleep with her goldfish, now named Mr. Bubbles, in a bowl beside her bed, Clara stood in the kitchen making hot chocolate. It had become her meditation, her way of connecting with the mother she'd lost and the mother she was becoming. Jack came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Vivian called while you were putting Ella to bed. She wants to visit next week. That would be nice. Ella will love her. She also said the forensics came back on your mother's case. They found enough evidence to posthumously charge Evelyn with murder. Clara's hand stilled on the spoon. It won't bring her back? No, but it's justice. Your mother deserves that. She deserves to be remembered for more than how she died. Clara turned in his arms. I want to start a music program for kids who can't afford lessons. Call it the Elizabeth Carlisle Music Academy. That's beautiful. She would love that. They stood there in the kitchen holding each other, and Clara marveled at how different her life had become. 6 months ago, she'd been a ghost, neither dead nor truly alive. Now she was a mother, a partner, a force for change in the world. I love you, she said, the words coming easier now. I love you too, even if you are worth $6 billion. 5.8 billion, she corrected. I gave some away today. To what? Children's hospitals, homeless shelters, that program that helps veterans with PTSD. Oh, and I bought the old Brennan farm. Jack pulled back. That's 40 acres. What are you going to do with 40 acres? Build a retreat center for the foundation, a place where families can reunite after long separations, where survivors can heal, somewhere beautiful and peaceful, and close to home. Everything important is close to home now. A week later, Vivian arrived with a U-Haul full of Clara's childhood belongings she'd been storing. I saved everything I could, she explained as they unpacked boxes. Photos, your mother's jewelry, your father's first computer, the one he built the company with. Ella was fascinated by everything, especially the photos of young Clara. You were little like me. Everyone was little once, Clara said. Though seeing her childhood self was jarring, that girl had no idea what was coming. Even Dad? Ella asked skeptically. Even Dad? I bet Mrs. Henderson has pictures. I need to see these immediately. As Ella ran next door, Vivian pulled Clara aside. You've built something beautiful here. It's not what anyone expected. The heiress to the Carlisle fortune, living in a 3-bedroom house in small-town Colorado. It's exactly what Elizabeth would have wanted. She always said the estate was too big, too cold. She wanted to raise you somewhere real. That evening, they had dinner in the backyard. Nothing fancy, just grilled burgers and corn on the cob. Ella regaled Vivian with stories from school. Jack and Clara shared amused glances over her head, and Mrs. Henderson stopped by with her famous apple pie. This is your family, Vivian said to Clara as they cleaned up. Not by blood, but by choice. And that's often stronger. Were you ever angry, Clara asked suddenly, that I got 20 years stolen while you had to live through them? Vivian considered this. I was angry at the situation at Evelyn, at the injustice, but never at you. And seeing you now, seeing how you've refused to let bitterness define you, it makes those 20 years of searching worth it. The next morning, Clara stood in the field that would become the retreat center, Jack beside her with the architectural plans. It'll take about a year to build, he said. Longer if you keep adding features. I want it perfect. Healing spaces, therapy rooms, a kitchen for communal meals, and a music room with the best piano money can buy. Of course. Ella was playing in the field picking wildflowers when she suddenly called out, Mom, Dad, come here. They found her standing by an old oak tree where someone had carved initials years ago. Look, she said, tracing the letters, VM plus JM. Do you think they lived happily ever after? Clara and Jack exchanged glances. They'd never told Ella, but those were Victor and Maria's parents' initials, some cosmic coincidence that their families had been connected long before they met. I think, Clara said carefully, that happiness isn't about ever after. It's about right now, this moment, being with people you love. That's not very romantic, Ella complained. It's the most romantic thing there is, Jack said, pulling both his girls close. Because right now is real, and it's ours. As autumn progressed toward winter, Clara's life settled into rhythms she'd never imagined. Morning coffee with Jack before he left for work, walking Ella to school, foundation meetings via video, lunch with Mrs. Henderson, homework help, family dinners, bedtime stories. It wasn't the life Sophia Carlisle had been raised for. It wasn't the life Prisoner 47B had been allowed to dream of. But it was the life Clara Mercer, she'd legally changed her name, had chosen, and that made it perfect. One evening, as the first snow of winter began to fall, Clara stood on the back porch in her usual spot, but this time she wasn't looking backward into memory or forward into uncertainty. She was completely present, listening to Jack and Ella inside arguing about whether marshmallows belonged in hot chocolate. Ella? Yes, Jack, no feeling the cold air on her face, tasting freedom with every breath. 20 years had been stolen, but she'd stolen them back, not the years themselves, but their power over her. She'd transformed victim into victor, not through revenge, but through the radical act of choosing joy, despite having every reason to choose bitterness. The foundation had now reunited 37 families. Carlisle Industries had pivoted toward humanitarian technology. The retreat center was breaking ground in spring, and in a small house in Silver Ridge, Colorado, a family that shouldn't exist thrived. "Mom," Ella called, "we need a tiebreaker, marshmallows or no marshmallows." Clara smiled, stepping back into the warmth of home. "Both, always both. Why choose when you can have everything?" Jack laughed, pulling her into his arms. "When did you become so wise?" "Somewhere between the rain and the snow," Clara said, thinking of that night on the highway that seemed both yesterday and a lifetime ago. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Silver Ridge in white, covering the past with the promise of tomorrow. And inside, a family that had found each other against all odds celebrated the small victory of perfectly made hot chocolate, knowing that sometimes the smallest victories were the ones that mattered most. The Carlisle fortune would continue to grow, managed by trustees and CEOs. The foundation would expand, saving more lost souls. The trials would continue, justice grinding forward. But none of that was Clara's real legacy. Her real legacy was simpler. A little girl who called her mom a man who loved her for who she was, rather than what she was worth, and the knowledge that she'd survived the unsurvivable and chosen to bloom rather than wither. In the end, she hadn't reclaimed the throne of the Carlisle Empire. She'd built something better, a home, a family, a life defined not by what had been taken, but by what had been given freely and with love. And in a small house at the end of Maple Street, as snow covered the mountains, and Ella laughed at something Jack said, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Not in a mansion, not in a boardroom, not on a throne, but here in this moment, with these people living a life that 20 years of captivity had tried to steal, but couldn't. Because some things love family, the choice to be happy couldn't be stolen. They could only be given, received, and cherished, and Clara cherished them all. 3 years had passed since that night on the highway, and the retreat center stood complete against the Colorado mountains, its wood and stone architecture blending seamlessly with the landscape. Clara stood in the main hall watching the first families arrive. People whose loved ones had been missing for years, some for decades, all carrying the same mixture of hope and fear she remembered from her own reunion with the world. "Mom, the Peterson family is here," Ella said, now 11, and carrying herself with a confidence that made Clara's heart swell. Their daughter was gone for 8 years. Clara watched through the window as a young woman, perhaps 25, stepped out of a car and into her parents' arms. The foundation had found her living under an assumed name in Canada, having fled an abusive relationship that had evolved into captivity. The reunion was raw, tearful, complicated, exactly why Clara had insisted on building this place. "Give them the river suite," Clara told Ella, who had appointed herself the unofficial welcoming committee. "It has the best view of the mountains." Jack appeared in the doorway, sawdust in his hair from the workshop he'd set up in the East Wing. He'd taken a step back from commercial construction to focus on the retreat center, creating custom furniture for each room pieces that were both beautiful and therapeutic to make. "The music room's ready for the dedication," he said. "Vivian's already crying, and she hasn't even seen it yet." The Elizabeth Carlisle Music Room was the heart of the center, featuring not just the grand piano Clara had promised, but an entire collection of instruments, recording equipment, and soundproof practice rooms. Music therapy had become one of their most successful programs, helping survivors express what words couldn't capture. "Is everyone here?" Clara asked. "Diana just arrived with Marcus. Mrs. Henderson is terrorizing the catering staff, and—" Jack paused, a strange expression crossing his face. "There's someone else. Someone who says you'll want to see him." Clara followed Jack outside to find an elderly man standing by a horse trailer. Her breath caught. The horse inside was ancient, gray-muzzled, but she knew those eyes. "Midnight," she whispered. "Hello, Miss Sophia." "James," the old groundskeeper said with a smile. "Thought it was time he came home to you." Clara ran to the trailer, her hands shaking as she opened it. Midnight nickered softly, nuzzling her hair like no time had passed at all. He was 34 now, far too old to ride, but still hers, still waiting. How did you... The estate's being sold, James explained. New owners didn't want an old horse. I couldn't let him go to strangers, not after your father made me promise to keep him safe for you. We'll build him a stable, Jack said immediately. There's perfect space near the creek. Ella, who had followed them out, stared at the horse in awe. This is your horse from before... From another lifetime, Clara said, stroking Midnight's neck. But yes, can I pet him? Of course, sweetheart. He's gentle. As Ella carefully approached Midnight, Clara saw the connection between past and present, the thread that linked who she'd been with, who she'd become. The horse represented everything stolen from her, but also everything that had waited faithful and patient for her return. The dedication ceremony was scheduled for afternoon, but first came lunch with the families. Clara made a point of sitting with each group sharing her story when asked, but mostly listening. The Peterson girl Amy was struggling with the same identity crisis Clara remembered. I don't know who I am anymore, Amy said quietly. I'm not who I was before, but I'm not who I became either. You're someone new, Clara told her, someone who gets to choose. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time. Did it get easier? Clara thought about the nightmares that still came. Sometimes the moments when crowds made her panic the way she still checked locks obsessively. Different, she said honestly. It gets different. The hard days become less frequent. The good days become normal instead of surprising. And eventually you realize you're not surviving anymore, you're living. Dr. Patricia Morse's former nurse, who'd turned whistleblower and helped convict several other staff members, had joined them as a counselor. Rebecca Liu was young, dedicated, and carried her own guilt about what she'd witnessed without acting on. I should have done something sooner, son, Rebecca said during a staff meeting. We all should have done something, Clara replied. But guilt without action is just self-indulgence. You're here now helping others. That's what matters. The music room dedication drew over 100 people, survivors, families, donors, and media. Clara had learned to use publicity strategically, keeping her family's private life protected while leveraging her story to help others. My mother believed music could heal anything, Clara said at the podium. She was wrong about that. Some things can't be healed, only integrated. But she was right that music could help us express the inexpressible, could connect us when words failed. This room is her legacy, not just to me, but to everyone who needs to find their voice again. Vivian played the first piece on the piano, the Chopin Nocturne that had been Elizabeth's favorite. Then Amy Peterson surprised everyone by asking to play. She was hesitant, rusty, but the melody that emerged was hauntingly beautiful. I hadn't played since before, Amy said afterward. I thought that part of me was dead. No part of you is dead, Ma, Clara assured her. Just sleeping, waiting for you to feel safe enough to wake it up. That evening, after the guests had gone and the families had retired to their suites, Clara found herself in the stable Jack and his crew had hastily constructed for midnight. The old horse was lying in the fresh straw, and she sat beside him, her back against the wall. I thought about you every day, she told him. In that white room, I'd imagine riding you through the mountains feeling free. You kept me sane when sanity seemed impossible. Midnight huffed softly, his big head resting near her lap. They sat there quietly, two survivors of a story that should have ended differently, finding peace in their reunion. Jack found her there an hour later. Ella's asking for her bedtime story. Tell her I'll be right there. But Jack sat down beside her instead. You okay? It's strange having him here, like the past and present are colliding. Maybe they need to. Maybe that's what healing looks like, not leaving the past behind, but integrating it into who you are now. Clara leaned against his shoulder. When did you become so wise? Probably around the time I married a complicated woman who talks to horses. They'd gotten married the previous year, a small ceremony in the backyard with just family and close friends. Clara had worn her mother's wedding dress altered to fit, and Ella had been the flower girl ring bearer and self-appointed wedding coordinator, all in one. I have something to tell you, Clara said suddenly. I was going to wait until tonight, but... Jack turned to look at her, and she saw the moment he understood. His eyes widened, dropping to her stomach. Are you... 6 weeks. I found out this morning. Clara. His voice broke on her name. Really? Really? He kissed her then there in the stable with an ancient horse as witness, and Clara felt the circle of her life completing, not ending, but continuing spiraling outward in ways she'd never imagined possible. Ella's going to be ecstatic, Jack said when they finally pulled apart. Should we tell her tonight? Are you kidding? If we don't, she'll never forgive us. They walked back to the house hand in hand, finding Ella in the living room, teaching origami to one of the younger siblings of a survivor. Finally, Ella exclaimed, Tommy doesn't believe me that you can make a crane that actually flaps its wings. Ella, sweetheart, can we talk to you for a minute? Clara asked. Something in her tone must have alerted Ella, because she immediately abandoned her origami project. Is everything okay? Everything's perfect, Jack said, but it's about to change. Are we moving? Panic flashed across Ella's face. No, baby, never, Clara assured her. But our family is going to get bigger. It took Ella exactly 3 seconds to understand. Her shriek probably woke everyone in the retreat center. A baby? You're having a baby. I'm going to be a big sister. She launched herself at them, and they held her between them, their little family that was about to grow. Can I name it? Ella asked immediately. No, both parents said in unison. Can I teach it origami? When it's older, say. Clara laughed. Can I tell Mrs. Henderson tomorrow? Can I bedtime, Jack said firmly, but he was smiling. As Clara tucked Ella in that night, the little girl, not so little anymore, took her hand. Mom. Yeah, sweetheart. The baby's lucky. Why's that? Because it gets to be born into our family. It won't have to be found or chosen. It'll just belong from the very beginning. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You belonged from the beginning, too. From the moment I saw you, you were mine. And you were mine, Ella said firmly. Dad and I claimed you first. Later, Clara stood on the back porch, their spot, their tradition looking out at the retreat center lights in the distance. Inside, families were healing, reconnecting, finding their way back to each other. It was her legacy, but more than that, it was her redemption, turning the worst thing that had happened to her into something that could help others. No hot chocolate tonight, Jack asked, joining her. Too queasy. Morning sickness is starting early. Maria was sick for 4 months with Ella. They rarely talked about Maria anymore, not because she was forgotten, but because she was integrated into their story. The woman who'd loved Jack first, who'd given them Ella, who'd made their family possible by existing and by letting go. Do you think she would have liked me? Clara asked. She would have loved you. She would have loved that you made us whole again. We made each other whole. The phone rang inside the emergency line for the foundation. Clara answered to find Diana's voice, excited despite the late hour. We found her, Clara. The Mitchell girl, the one who's been missing for 12 years. She's alive. Clara closed her eyes, remembering another phone call, another missing girl found. Where? Portland. Living on the streets but alive. The family wants to use the retreat center if you have room. We'll make room. We always make room. After handling the logistics, Claire returned to the porch where Jack was setting up the telescope Ella had gotten for her birthday. Want to see something cool, what? He asked. Clara looked through the lens to see Saturn, its rings visible even through their amateur equipment. Ella's convinced the baby should be named Saturn if it's a girl, Jack said. Absolutely not. That's what I told her, but she's making a list of space names. Of course she is. They stood together looking at the stars, and Clara thought about how far she'd traveled, not in distance, but in healing. 3 years ago, she'd been a ghost. Now she was a wife, a mother, an advocate, a survivor who'd become a thriver. I love our life, she said suddenly. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. They make the good parts shine brighter. The next morning brought chaos, as mornings always did. Ella had told Mrs. Henderson about the baby despite being told to wait, and their neighbor had arrived with enough breakfast casserole to feed an army. The Peterson family needed help navigating insurance paperwork. The Mitchell family was arriving that afternoon. Marcus called with updates on the latest missing persons cases. But in the middle of it all, Clara felt the flutter of new life inside her, too early to be movement. Probably just imagination, but real to her nonetheless. This child would never know, captivity would never question their worth or place in the world. They would grow up surrounded by love in a home built on choice rather than chance. "You okay?" Jack asked, finding her in a quiet moment between crises. "Perfect," Clara said, and meant it. That afternoon, she walked through the retreat center, checking on families, listening to stories, offering hope where she could. The Peterson girl was in the music room playing piano with increasing confidence. A father and son were reconnecting over a chess game in the library. A mother sat in the garden, writing in a journal, processing her daughter's return. This was her father's fortune at work, not in stock prices or corporate acquisitions, but in human healing. Victor Carlyle would have been proud. As the sun set over the mountains, Clara stood in the field where she'd once planned the center, now watching it serve its purpose. Ella ran past playing with some of the younger children. Jack was teaching a woodworking class to some of the teenagers. Mrs. Henderson was leading a cooking lesson that seemed to involve more laughter than actual cooking. 23 years ago, Evelyn Graves had tried to erase Sophia Carlyle from existence. She'd failed. Not only had Clara survived, she'd transformed. She'd taken the broken pieces of her life and built something beautiful, something lasting, something that would continue long after the last trial ended and the last headline faded. The baby moved again. Definitely imagination. But Clara placed her hand on her stomach anyway. "You're going to be born into a strange, wonderful, complicated family," she whispered. "But you'll never doubt you're loved. That's my promise to you." Talking to yourself, Vivian appeared beside her, having arrived for an extended visit. "Talking to the future." "Ah," Vivian smiled. "Jack told me. Congratulations." "It feels like a miracle. After everything, to be able to create new life." "It's not a miracle. It's a choice. You chose to heal, to love, to trust again. This baby is the result of those choices." They watched as Ella organized the children into some elaborate game involving dragons and rescue missions. She was a natural leader, bossy, but kind, protective of anyone she perceived as vulnerable. "She's going to be an incredible big sister," Vivian observed. "She's already making lists of everything she wants to teach the baby." "Of course she is. She's your daughter in every way that matters." That evening, the retreat center hosted its first group dinner, all the families together sharing food and stories. Clara watched from the doorway as connections formed, as people who'd thought they were alone in their pain found community. Amy Peterson was talking to the Mitchell girl who'd just arrived, offering the same comfort Clara had given her. The cycle of healing was continuing, each person who found their way back helping the next lost soul navigate the journey. "This is what you built," Jack said, appearing beside her. "This is your legacy." "Our legacy," Clara corrected. "None of this exists without you, without that night on the highway." "I almost didn't stop," Jack admitted. "It was raining so hard and I was tired and Ella was waiting. For one second I thought about driving past. But you didn't." "No, something made me stop. Call it God, fate, instinct, something knew you needed me. And you needed me." "I didn't know it then, but yes." They were interrupted by Ella running up, breathless with excitement. "Mom, Dad Midnight is standing up. James says he wants to see the sunset." They followed her to the stable where indeed the ancient horse was standing, at the fence facing west, where the sun was painting the mountains gold and crimson. "He knows he's home," James said quietly. "Animals always know." Clara leaned against the fence beside her horse, her husband and daughter beside her, her aunt nearby, her chosen family scattered throughout the property. The baby fluttered again, still imagination, but growing more real with each passing day. "We're all home," she said softly. As the sun disappeared behind the peaks, Clara thought about the woman she'd been on that highway 3 years ago, lost, broken, without memory or hope. That woman was still part of her, would always be part of her. But she was no longer in control. The woman in control now was Clara Mercer, mother, wife, advocate, survivor. She had taken 20 stolen years and transformed them into purpose. She had taken unimaginable trauma and converted it into compassion. She had taken a fortune built on suffering and redirected it toward healing. "Ready to go in?" Jack asked as darkness settled over the mountains. "One more minute." She stood there feeling the life growing inside her, watching the lights come on in the retreat center, listening to the sounds of families reconnecting. Somewhere Evelyn Graves sat in a federal prison, her empire dismantled, her freedom gone. But Clara rarely thought about her anymore. Revenge had never been the goal resurrection was, and she had been resurrected, not as Sophia Carlyle, the billionaire heiress, but as Clara Mercer, a woman who had learned that the opposite of captivity wasn't freedom, it was belonging. And she belonged here with these people doing this work, living this life. "Now I'm ready," she said, taking Jack's hand. They walked back to the house together, Ella running ahead to set the table for dinner, calling back that she'd decided the baby should be named Cosmo if it was a boy. "Still better than Saturn," Jack muttered. Clara laughed, the sound carrying across the field to where the retreat center stood as testament to the power of refusing to let trauma have the last word. Inside their home, dinner waited. Simple food, complicated family, endless love. Clara took her seat at the table, Ella chattering about school, Jack stealing bites of food while pretending to cook Mrs. Henderson, stopping by with dessert and staying for coffee. This was her kingdom, not a corporate empire or a vast estate, but a dinner table where everyone was welcome, where stories were shared, where healing happened one meal at a time. "Tell us a story, Mom," Ella requested as they settled in for the evening. "What kind of story? A true one, about before?" Clara thought for a moment, then began. "Once upon a time there was a girl who loved horses and music and thunderstorms." She told the story differently now, not as tragedy, but as transformation. The lost years were part of it, but they weren't the whole story. The story continued here in this moment with this family, with life growing and love expanding and hope proving itself stronger than any prison. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, but inside there was warmth and light and the sound of belonging, the greatest fortune